Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Knack.
Thanks, Mayor Sohi, and again, thanks to everyone on this panel for being here. I guess I should have checked, is Ms. Cronwet-Martin still with us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for being here. You had talked about the desire to have sort of a financial assessment, and what I was wondering about, have you had a chance to go through the technical studies that were done as part of the creation of the city plan at all?
I've just done some high level looking at everything, but again, I believe these district plans move quite a way away from that. And when I talk about these assessments that I have looked at, like I said, compared what the city of Calgary did, they've done much more depth assessments, I believe.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was curious about, because there was a report done, it's a 46-page report as part of the creation of the city plan. There was a detailed financial assessment of sort of growth as we had been going for decades upon decades versus how it would be envisioned under the city plan, and essentially the financial savings that we would see. Because I think you had suggested that it would greenfield development is primarily paid for by the developers, which unfortunately is not really accurate and part of the challenge what we're in the first place. They covered the utility infrastructure and the roads, but nothing else beyond that: police stations, rec centers, libraries, parks, all of that. So I guess what I would just ask is, if you haven't had a chance to read through that, it might be a worthwhile read, because I think it gives you that analysis you're looking for about why this
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Okay.
But what you're talking about is operating. I'm talking about the massive amount of capital.
No, and this actually specifically talks about capital, that financial analysis. So,
and there's a lot more to this the capital analysis than what was done in that 41-page report.
Okay, yeah,
and that's why across Canada, maybe with the exception of Vancouver, they've limited it to 4 dwelling units per single family lot, simply because of the impact on existing infrastructure. And that's with modern day technology.
Yeah. There's another report that was done back in 2014, the Integrated Infrastructure Management Plan, which costed out all of the infrastructure needs for the 3 undeveloped parcels, 3 undeveloped area structure plans in southwest, southeast, and northeast Edmonton. Had you ever had a chance to read that as well?
No, but what I'm talking about is that's 2014, and I appreciate the fact what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is the impact of the intensification that you're putting in place in existing areas, because that is doing things in an existing neighborhood is way more expensive. And my first job was with an engineering company, and as a planning tech in there, and the first day of the job, the engineer came in and said, "I hope you're not one of those, pardon the language, dumbass planning types who comes up with all sorts of ideas and expects us to resolve it." And subsequently, for the zoning bylaw and for this, I was curious. I called him and I said, "Hey, what do you think will happen with this?" And he said, "I wish I was doing business in Edmonton in 10 years because we're going to be spending a lot of money."
Okay. If you have more information to share, the reason I look puzzled if you're looking at the camera is that every study and report that we've seen over the last decade, both internally within the city of Edmonton and frankly across the country, has shown that the cost of new growth in new areas is substantially more than the cost of growth in established areas, because you don't have to spend nearly as much to provide the services for those individuals, because you already have fire halls, you already have libraries, you already have, in many cases, utility infrastructure that is under capacity in a lot of cases. And so it just what you seem to be sharing is contrary to anything I've ever read or seen. And so if you have more information, I'd love if you can share that with us, because that,
well,
yeah, it's
just. If you look at what the city of Calgary did, they left it to 4 for a reason, and they told their administration that they were recommending it be no more than 4 dwelling units per single family, as I explained, because the existing infrastructure, this is the underground infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
And I hear what you're saying, and I guess where, there's been studies by EPCOR that show, because most of the mature neighborhoods have fewer people today than they did 50 years ago, and fixtures are far more efficient now. There seems to be, in a lot of cases, still a lot of capacity, and so doesn't mean there's zero cost, but it's that there's, most of the studies I've seen have shown that there's less cost. So I'm going to run out of time, but yeah, if
Okay.
you have any information, I'd appreciate if you can reach out and share that with us. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Councillor.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Cartmill?
Great, thank you. Thanks for everyone for being here today, sharing your thoughts. I have several questions for you, Mr. Taft. I'm just going to rattle them off here. You made mention of like flyers in every mailbox. Did you mean that literally? That there should be a flyer to every home in Edmonton, essentially? I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm just trying to get some context.
Yeah, no, I do literally mean that. I mean, I brought an example. This is from maybe 3 weeks ago. Big poster-sized flyer dropped in every mailbox about speed bumps in our neighborhoods.
Did that come from the city, or did that come from the? Yeah.
But no, it's City of Edmonton.
Yeah. No, I wasn't looking. I wasn't looking at you. I thought maybe it came from the community league or something.
No, it's a big flyer. So if we can do that for speed bumps,
Yeah.
I would have thought, something like this size that had, say, a map of nodes and corridors and some details on what it meant for each district would be really informative, and I think would help with your public engagement.
And then on engagement, has your community had the opportunity to sort of do the in-person, roll out the map on the table, stand around and talk about it kind of engagement on this?
I'm not involved in our community league.
No, but just your community generally that you would have heard of as a citizen, that the city hosted.
No, I have not heard of that, and
Okay.
and I guess my reference point for engagement is an open process. So I have heard some disappointed comments about those events in other neighborhoods, if we're talking about the same kind of event where the planners make the presentation and it's a fairly stultified discussion. I recall, none of you on council will recall this, but the development of the ARPs, at least the ones that I was involved with, that's now more than 10 years ago, but there were really engaged public workshops held repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I think the city needs to build some trust and engagement with its citizens.
Oh, there's no doubt of that. I should not comment, but I agree with the sentiment. So, I want to check on this piece when we get to questions of administration, because there's projects in our neighborhood where, effectively engagement begets engagement. So there's been enough traffic on the website and enough inquiry that, a big public thing was deemed of value. But on this, not for the ward I represent, I can count the emails on one hand, or at least the number of people that are emailing on one hand. So it doesn't rise to the level of, let's have a giant public meeting about it.
Well, that...
Sorry, sir. I'm going to ask you to, okay, I'll give you warning. If you do that again, you'll be out.
Can I apologize? I don't know the...
Okay, good. Okay, accept your apologies. Please don't just interrupt again. Thank you.
I think one of the reasons that public response to city councillors is so low is that public awareness is so low. And I'd love to go door knocking with you, or I'd invite you and any councillor to go door knocking. I used to do a lot of that. And just go door to door, and I'll sit, and ask people, what do you know about the city plan? What do you know about district plans? And see what the level of awareness is.
Well, I've done that, contrary to other commentary, and the commentary back is like, well, that's a downtown thing, right? What I want to talk to you is about taxes and roads and the things that are happening locally, right? So, and I'm not debating that with you. There's, but
if the city, I'm not going to volunteer anything, but
you're
I would
welcome to
just
come
say that
along.
our totally volunteer, donation-funded Coalition for Better Infill has held events that have drawn quite a lot larger than the city, and I've asked myself, why is that? And I'm, anyways, if I would happily chat with somebody about developing an engagement program.
I guess I'll take it to a higher level again. There's questions around engagement that are not yet answered in your view.
Yeah, well, my answer is that the public engagement around this has been woefully inadequate.
Yeah. I've got a few more for you. I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cartmel. Before I go to Councillor Rice, I see that there are a couple of new people have joined the meeting to observe. So I'll go through the expectations very quickly. As a meeting chair, I have a responsibility to ensure the safety of all participants in today's meeting. As part of that responsibility, inappropriate comments or gestures will not be tolerated. If they occur, I will direct the clerk to immediately remove anyone engaged in such behavior. The type of behavior that will result in the removal from the meetings includes making disrespectful comments and directed at individual staff members or other public speakers, or using profane language, responsive behaviors to show support or dissent, such as shouting, cheering, clapping, or using the chat or emotional response features in the Google Meet will also be not permitted. Okay. Please, Councillor Rice, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. Thank you, everyone, and for being here today. So my first question is going to Ms. Martin, speaker, number 3.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I actually really appreciate your presentation based on the facts and the data and you provided in terms of the municipal infrastructure upgrade. So I just want to get some clarification, and because I heard my colleagues talk about some past historical reports and for the technical studies and also financial situation, but I heard from you specific talk about some utility underground infrastructure, is not talk about libraries, not talk about bus services or other type of services. Is that my understanding correct?
Yes, what I'm talking about is the underground infrastructure. I'm talking about
Okay.
water, sanitary sewer,
Yes.
mostly sanitary sewer, storm, electrical, things like that. Those are the core ones. Big ones, sanitary sewer and storm. Water has changed dramatically because of things
Yes.
like low flush toilets and everything else.
Yes,
But-
that is why I would like to confirm that, because I asked a similar question back to zoning bylaw renewal project last year, and then that's his concern I heard over and over, and also in my own words, to speak to my own word I represent, there are many, many issues actually caused by this type of underground infrastructure upgrading is not meet the densification development. And so lots of like water pond on community streets and water issues, sewer system issues happened over and over. I heard lots of concern about that. So then based on this scope, and you provide some like the financial data, would you be able to share that data with us?
Yeah, I can send you the reports. Sorry to interrupt you. I apologize. I will state this, and this goes to Councillor Knack as well. If he doesn't believe that, why does he think the development industry at the December meeting told the committee of council that clearly they could not, that there would be significant infrastructure upgrades required and that they could not pay for it? They would expect the city to upfront it. Numerous people said that. Numerous people said that. And so they understand that.
Okay.
And so the development industry understands that. I looked at, there was actually news reports on how Calgary made their decision to stay to four dwelling units per single family home.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. And thank you for brought this concern out. And this is actually is a concern I heard lots. And who is going to pay those infrastructure upgrades? And then, who, how that impact our city's capital budget, and all this type of question will, I think, I will continue to ask to the administration later on, and when that section coming. So we'll appreciate you share that information with us. So based on the calculation you did and on your own, I have follow-up question. And because is your calculation is based on the 50% of district policy seats and for the unions needs to be redeveloped and infill, or your calculation based on different percentage?
No,
Because
what I
there will
did,
be different costs and different financial data for that.
so when I was looking at my research, I looked at what some of the municipalities in BC were saying the costs were to redo infrastructure. I looked at what, Calgary told their administration, and then I looked at FCM, and FCM are addressing this across the country in general. And so they were talking about all types of development, and they're the ones that came up with the cost of $107,000 per dwelling unit. That's what infrastructure is required. And that's what they're saying the cost is. And so that's what I based it on. Then I looked at 50% of our population increase going to infill. And that's what I based the numbers on. Now, it's because the way it's engineered, it takes, it's not one size fits all, but they were giving a generalized cost.
Okay, thank you very much. And then my time is out.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, thank you. My questions are to Mr. Noubert. I found your presentation really compelling, but one of the things that I grapple with, and I'll just being fully transparent, I was very disappointed in administration's GBA plus analysis. It actually didn't talk about any kind of how the policy is intersecting with equity. It talked only about engagement, which should just be the what we heard report as opposed to what we heard and what we did as opposed to a GBA plus analysis. But the thing that I'm grappling with is this. We approved the city plan that talks about nodes and corridors. So I feel like it actually is a revisit of city plan. If we're actually going to talk about, should we be pushing our most attainable housing to the margins of neighborhoods? Thoughts? Because right now, like, district plan is just implementing what is, like, they're sort of translating from city plan, right?
Yes. I mean, the like nodes and corridors description in city plan before they put the maps out said that I think the major corridors would extend 3 to 5 blocks, and the minor ones would be 1 to 3 blocks. So don't quote me exactly.
Yeah.
But they went for the minimum on all of those. So the like corridors, I've chosen. I'm one of the people who had the privilege to choose where I lived, and I live near a major corridor, but a block over. Nobody wants to live on 99th. I don't. So that's what happened between the city plan and the maps, was that all of a sudden they went for minimums, to cram as many people as possible.
Well, it is the
Bad
tension,
phrasing,
right?
but-
Because you're hearing from so many other people on the panel today about, it's not enough engagement, but also probably administration chose the most conservative of that because of public engagement.
Well, and exclusionary zoning has its roots in racism and classism, and that's why I wanted to bring on an equity perspective.
Yeah.
Because we are perpetuating that richer people get to live in nicer places, and I think that we should talk about that more publicly rather than talking about developers. Developers don't build buildings for them to sit empty. They're building them for people to live in. So that is our public good, is that we get more cheaper housing.
So what are your thoughts on 2.5.2.6, the addition there, where it allows a little bit more flexibility around sort of off corridor? I know you said expand the transit. I think there's a whole line of questioning I have for administration around the repeal of the transit orientated design, the document I'm talking about, and what it translates to in the district plans. But I'm just trying to understand, like, from your perspective, do you like that? Like, does that help alleviate some of that? Because to me, that is sort of an equity breach piece.
Yes, we like that, but I guess whereas some people are seeing them as extremely powerful and able to just transform the entire city, we don't see them as strong enough, and we wish that the maps would more clearly I guess, express where people are allowed to live and developers to build. But I mean,
So if it's just if it was the 5 blocks as opposed to the 3 blocks, so you don't think it's, because I think it's like, it's really a fundamental flaw with the city plan, actually. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like, that's what I'm grappling with. And
yeah, well, I mean, it's tough to throw away years of work, right?
I know, yeah.
If the nodes weren't kind of so restricted, like, you know, most of the area in the university node is provincial land anyway, so it's easy to make it all, oh yeah, you can build, the province, if they decide, is allowed to build, you know.
Yeah.
So if that node was more reasonably, I guess, drawn.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question is to Mr. Percy. Is he still here?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I found your stuff really compelling because I think about even Inglewood, which is in the Central District, similar to Glenora, very high historical significance. Same with Calder, which is also in the Northwest District. Neither are kind of mapped or have any sort of protections around them. So I just wanted to ask you though, in the district planning as it is now, it does have one clause. Oh, I'm out of time. I'm sorry. I will come back. I apologize.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Paquette.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to follow up on some of those questions with Mr. Norbert about engagement. So something I've been grappling with is that we have the city plan, we have the zoning bylaw renewal, we've got this, and we'll have more things in the future. And to my mind, these aren't one-offs, like it's a continuum of engagement on this whole planning ecosystem that the city is engaged in and has been because we hadn't updated for over 50 years. And so I'm just wondering, like, when we're talking about engagement, like, where do you draw the line of, like, the continuum versus the pieces? Because a lot of the engagement we did in the city plan, for example, it's so fresh, it still applies to a lot of things we do with CBR and things that we were seeing in this. So your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I guess as a city watcher, I've been seeing engagement around the city plan for years. So I'm not sure, I don't really understand complaints about lack of engagement. I think that maybe some of the more recent non-city organized events have attracted more engagement because they're based on inflammatory half-truths, to be honest. So I think that the city has been engaging in good faith for years on this, and it seems to me like, you know, we elected you to do a job. This isn't a direct democracy like where all the citizens vote on every motion, and so. You know, I think that the city needs to draw a line, you know, to balance engagement versus action. And I find that if you don't like the result, of course you attack the process, right? So not enough engagement is what people who don't like the result often say.
Okay, well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, when people feel like they're not heard in the engagement, they're going to say you weren't listening. Like, so
well,
if they're not getting,
I've seen a lot of listening going on. I think this is our most direct, you know, this is the most democratic level of government. Here I am talking to decision makers. Like we're very privileged, you know, to have this kind of access. And I really appreciate council's efforts to listen deeply to everyone. You can tell it's obvious that it's happening. I think that there's been a lot of engagement. I've been watching it roll out for years. And so, I mean, yeah, what can I say? It just seems like we've heard a lot about this whole process.
Okay, so in that vein, you know, we're getting calls to maybe refer this back and things like that. Other people are saying just pass it, but referring back, that would mean that we ask administration, you know, deal with these particular issues and then come back with, you know, the revised plan. The other thing, like with the ZBR, it got passed and then amendments said essentially the same thing. So do you have a preference either way between a referral and then administration comes back in about a year or two, or you pass it and then you make the amendments through community engagement and through refinement over that same period of time?
Well, we landed on, you know, referral, and then you can keep, like, allowing good developments to be built under the city plan generally as you have. And, you know, because I think as was, you know, discussed with that building near in Windsor Park a couple of weeks ago, I think Councillor Knack brought it up, like, right now, things that you know, because of the map, like, things that you would have approved 6 months ago, all of a sudden, it makes the process seem disingenuous because the map says that nothing's supposed to be there, that you're not allowed to approve a building.
Except that's how we have public hearing, because developers come and say, well, we'd like to do this anyway, and then you hear it out, just like we did with the Windsor Park. So I don't see the difference.
I think that you know, the maps are, I would assume trying to build trust, right, with the community by, but of course, any council can choose not to stick with the maps.
So with referral, are you concerned about any of the things that are good in the district planning that won't be implemented for years, and possibly a revised city plan or district plan that comes back will never get passed?
Yeah, well, there's a risk there that is very concerning. Yeah, that's why, you know, I don't hold the vote myself, but I know it's hard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your candor. Thank you. I did have one more question for Mr. Tappett. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burkett. Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to all of our speakers. I'll stick with same speaker, Speaker Norbert, and really just wanted to hone in on some of the arguments you were making around equity. And when you were describing how apartments and higher density housing are often used as almost a shield for single family homes from louder and more congested thoroughfares, it reminded me of the old residential infill guidelines. And I was looking back, and there's actually some language in there around retaining a critical mass of single family homes that should be protected in the core of the mature neighborhood, with higher density homes at the fringes. And understanding that we're retiring that, I guess I'm trying to get a sense that from you that if we're retiring that, moving towards district plans, trying to course correct away from some of those inequities, do you feel that like the policy as it is written is adequate? It's just a matter of translating that onto the map so that it is clear and transparent around what our expectations are for density along nodes and corridors. Is it a mapping exercise? I guess a visual exercise.
Yeah, we think it is. The like city plan is a great planning document that's had a lot of work put into it. Up until the maps, we were fully behind it and excited about it. So yeah, we just think that this last step was not done to our satisfaction.
Okay, that's helpful. And I know some of your other colleagues from Grow Together, when they were speaking, I didn't get a chance to ask questions of them, but some of them mentioned the new federal standard around transit-oriented development. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts there around kind of locking in at the 400-meter radius versus the 800 meters that Grow Together is asking for and suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, we think that a seismic shift in zoning was made several months ago when BC, like BC province, like enacted a law that it be 800 meters around mass LRT stations, and so yeah, we just think that we should be leveraging our LRT stations, which we've invested billions in, and also they provide again like equitable access to our city. So 400 meters is great. 800 meters would be better. So I think we're just following the best in class currently in Canada lead of the BC government there. So
great, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Councillor Stevenson, can you take the chair, please?
I have the chair.
I will carry on with you. You're popular today, Conrad. I would say that society's understanding of equity issues, elected officials, leaders, administrations, understanding of equity issues continues to evolve, right? And we are getting probably more and more better at it, not to the place where we wanted to be, because it's evolution, right? So maybe when city plan was developed, our understanding of equity issues and its intersection with land use planning wasn't as better as it is today. It still needs to be better as well, right? So I'm coming back to something that this council decided, which was to restructure the public transit system and focus public transit on major corridors, with the understanding that more apartments are on major corridors, right? So what you're trying to ask, I think what you're saying, if and I agree with you, people should be able to live in nicer places who, if they can't afford to live in a single-family home, they should have equal right to live in a beautiful place if they live in an apartment. I agree with you that. But the integration of transportation and land use planning, I understand on the 800 meter, I'm probably supportive of that. But if we push more people, more apartments into the inner of the city on collector roads, then we also need to improve bus service to make sure that people can actually move around the city as well. This intersection of public transit and land use planning when it comes to equity issues.
Right, well, I think with the corridors, as long as you made them wider so that people can live in the more pleasant places, I mean, you're still leveraging all that density.
Got it, okay. So you're saying, so your two recommendations are expand the corridors and expand the circle around LRT stations or transit corridor, or nodes, right, or stations.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then I go back to the concerns raised by the community around policy 2526, right? Hearing you, I am tending to agree that you are making a very valid point that people should be able to live and we should be supportive of that policy. Where I'm struggling is that with that approval, having high-rise building, which I can support, but not having access to public transit, that is a problem. Then we are forcing people with the least amount of means to actually make very expensive decisions, or forced to make them expensive decisions of driving personal vehicles. So it goes counter to equity issues. Any thoughts?
Yeah, you get to live across from a nice park, but then you aren't as tied into the transit network.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point. That might be a kind of gap in that clause.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the decision that were made in the past to eliminate bus service on collector roads, right? And then here we are. I think these are things. These things are evolving. Our thinking is evolving as well around these issues. But you triggered a question in my mind, because I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you on equity issues, that people who have less means, and I lived in an apartment building, now I live in a single family home, but where I lived in an apartment was not as nice as where I live now, right? So I think those are very you're raising very valid points. I want to thank you for that. Yeah, okay, good. With that, I will move the second round.
Thank you. Anyone to second?
Second.
Councillor Rutherford, thank you. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. Thank you. I'll return the chair, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I will go to Councillor Knack.
Thanks, Mayor Sophie. I think Mr. Pavlik is still there. I think I saw us. Are you still there with us?
I'm still with you.
Wonderful, thank you. Wanted to just ask a little bit more about the priority growth area piece you touched on. The way I understood your comments is your submission that from what you understand, the way the plans are written, the priority growth areas can only be used for the larger scale development. There's like essentially they're all being changed.
Yes, going forward, that's the way it's written.
Okay. my understanding, and I'll ask our city administration on this, is that they're doing work around looking at all of the priority growth areas. There was a separate report that was identified, and I think about 20-ish different nodes and corridors, and that they are going to look at a few of them where they might want to proactively upzone, but it wasn't going to be a citywide piece. So I'll confirm that with our city.
Oh, yeah, on that point, no, I'm not saying it's going to happen all at once.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm saying it's going to happen to 4 or 5 that are mentioned now. I'm going to say as well, they talk about the 19 that are identified are subject to change. It seems curious that they would try 4 or 5 as an experiment when maybe they should try 1. And I really want council to keep in mind that the city does not, and by the city, I'm not talking about council, I'm talking about administration, does not have a very good track record when it comes to identifying how and where and what to develop. And, the corridors are a perfect example. Look how much money was poured, millions and millions of dollars poured into that. And it was going to be the next development. It's going to be residential. It was going to be high rises. It was going to be reformative. The east end of the city was going to be now a livable place. And you take a look there, and I go there every day when I ride my bike to work. I go past it every single day, and it is boarded up windows. It is crackheads and meth heads lying on the sidewalk. Nobody wants to live there.
Okay.
So, that's an example of something that went bad.
Sure.
And then, of course, we have Blatchford. No further comment on that. If you want to build high-rise and densify near LRT, Blatchford sounds like a great opportunity.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. That's helpful information. Mr. Boyd, I know you had touched on a few things in your presentation, and I know you sort of referenced tangentially some of the questions I asked. I guess why I've been asking a lot of the questions that I was, I know you touched on the fact that the city is going to be the one building the district, and I guess what where I'm maybe not fully understanding this and why I feel I have to ask questions is that, like, we have land use planning that sets out how places can be developed, but we're not the ones actually doing that. But so maybe, am I misunderstanding sort of the point you were trying to raise there?
I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry, not Mr. Pavlik, Mr. Boyd.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I'm sorry. Apologies.
No problem.
Yeah, carry on.
I mean, there's Occam's razor right there, right? You're trying to find that balance of the development in what goes where. I mean, there's some very valid points about, some of the communities around here that already have historical significance. What happens to those communities if we start, playing around with the nodes and we start playing around with the corridors? I mean, from my perspective, I would like to see, this district policy wrapped up in one great big document. And I think that it can be done in under 300 pages. I know that we've gone from whatever it was, a couple of thousand pages down to 500 pages. And I think if it falls under, if the policy falls under one policy for the entire city, and then from that policy, those in the bureaucracy that are fielding those permits or those what I want to say here, allotments, the land allotments, it goes down to that level, but it all falls under one policy instead of having 15 district policies that can potentially lead to, like I said, a natural progression of more counselors, more restrictions. We've seen that worldwide. So I think the idea is sound. I just think that we need to do it under one policy for the city of Edmonton and make it all encompassing.
Have you gone through, and I know we don't have much time, so maybe this is a quick one. Have you read through the city plan itself, the full city plan document?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And I know we've only got 12 seconds left, and I have a whole bunch of highlighted areas that I would love to discuss further with you guys.
Okay. All right. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Councillor Cartmel.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to pick up with Mr. Taft where we left off. So I think I heard you say that, if these plans are going to be put into action, that there should be some sort of quid pro quo from developers. And you listed off a few things. I would just want to make sure I got them. Family size units, or is that number of bedrooms in your definition, or is that size of a unit?
We can work out the detailed definitions, but typically I think it would include probably some of both.
Yeah, environmental standards or building,
Yeah, I mean, would
Sustainability
it
standards.
not be exciting for Edmonton to say, we're establishing solar energy corridors or net zero corridors?
Yeah.
Why aren't we, just speaking personally, I think we should be aiming higher. I think we're giving, the council is risking giving all kinds of things to developers and getting very little in return.
what else was there? You had a few other items.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't meant to be an exhaustive list.
No, but, and I get that's an idea, but it's,
Yeah, higher standards on energy efficiency,
Yeah.
Requirements for neighborhood context, so that,
yeah,
so
okay.
that, you know, and Calgary has gone this way, I understand, in recent decisions. So those are some of the examples.
So my understanding of and I admit that I've had a couple conversations with our administration today, so I might be mistaken on this, but my understanding was that effectively the city plan was the base. We refined the zoning bylaw to reflect what we were doing already as a council in adopting the city plan and what we're doing on land use public hearings. And that now the district plans take that city plan and refine it for local context. So, you know, we can bundle in some of the things that you're talking about, or we can, you know, talk about this arterial or that corridor. Do you see that the same way? And I guess my question is similar to Councillor Paquette's question earlier. If we don't proceed with these district plans, then we go back to the city plan, and that's already approved. So what's the better game here?
Oh, I'm not going to get drawn into that. I mean, I have heard the phrase repeatedly, or it seems to me I have the city plan as a living document. And I don't know how long City Council is going to proceed without reviewing the city plan and saying, well, maybe that needs to be adjusted a bit. Maybe we need to aim higher here or back off there. So
well, maybe we
so
do
I don't,
that now,
I think,
right?
I think that that saying that allowing the city plan to dictate everything, I think views the city plan the wrong way. I think the city plan, it's like legislation, it's like regulations. It's a document that can be changed. And over as the years pass and as the complexity of the document unfolds, I think those changes should be considered. All kinds of changes, I'm sure.
Well, that's why like when I look at the city plan, I feel like you can draw from that city plan just about anything and use it to reinforce just about anything. And that's why I feel like there's a need for further refinement. But I'm hearing that there's a lot of concern and a lot of things about the district plans that need refinement too. So I'm trying to figure out which is the better path. I have one more question for you. You know, you've done a deep dive into all this stuff. Right? Fair to say?
A deep dive into all this stuff. That's a
Sorry,
broad.
into the district. I'm sorry.
I mean, I've read through the district policy and looked at, especially at the Scona district plan. Yeah.
Do you share the apprehension that these district plans are going to restrict people's movements from district to district?
I see absolutely nothing in any of the documents I've read that would suggest that that's the case. And I have no idea what the legal basis the city could use would be for that. So no, I do not share that concern.
You see this as a precursor to some sort of permitting process that disallows you to buy a stake in this community or go work in that one? No, I'll just say straight out no. And that's not why you're here. You have other concerns.
It never even occurred to me until I sat here the last day or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taft. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cardwell. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. So, Ms. Taft, I will need you to take a little bit break, and I will come back to you. My first question goes to Mr. Bix. Are you still there?
I am, yes.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So you actually brought the concern about the district policy and plans as a living documents, and then I recall the last year when we discussed the zoning bylaw, and then many comments say this is not perfect. They leave that zoning bylaw as a leave document. We can waiting for the district policy and plans to come back to make some update. So that's I know it's not perfect. That is one. There are many reasons, and I voted against the zoning bylaw last year. So right now, I expect some change or improvement in this district policy could address some gaps in the zoning bylaw. So from your perspective, when you mentioned this, did you see the ending and in this in front of us for this policy and plans to address some gaps in the zoning bylaw? And then for this living documents perspective, is there anything we could improve?
I just brought up the idea of a living document because a few weeks ago when Michael Jans brought a motion to regulate short-term rentals, the reasoning for not approving it or not passing that motion was because everyone was worried about unintended consequences. And the solution to that was just sending it back to administration to provide a report, by my understanding, third quarter 2025. So I just don't understand why this living document can apply not to that. Why not pass that now, see what happens, and then change it later? That's all I was trying to get at with the living document comment.
Okay, thank you for that comment. So based on that comment, you still would like to see this document have some change or refer back to administration, and then instead of we pass it right now.
The only issue that I raise with the district plans at this point is the policy 2.5.2.6. Yeah, and like I said in my presentation, I think this will clog up administration. I think you will see way more requests for variances. The idea with all of this is to streamline the process. That doesn't seem like streamlining the process. And it's just too subjective. You could interpret open space as many different things.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. And then, yeah, we heard similar concern for that 2.5 and 2.6. So thank you. My next question is going to Ms. Colvin. And are you still there?
I'm still here.
Oh,
yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. You actually brought a very interesting concept and to the district policy in terms of the design. So I would like to hear a little bit more about how that design, and because your comment is a lack of design and in this policy, are you looking for to implement some like design concept or guidance and in the policy added to this policy? That is what you're concerned about it?
My concern is a deep respect for design. So really considering what the impact's going to be when we build things. What's the impact going to be on the people who are going to live in the space? What's the impact on the people around the space, and designing according to that? And I don't feel that that's something developers are good at all. And I think most of the complaints that the city gets about what they do is developers not thinking deeply enough about how they're going to create space.
So you're looking for to see more that type of sense in the policy?
I am. I'm interested in seeing that everywhere. So maybe one day a school of architecture and a big base of creative people will give us much broader perspectives in design and more human design.
Okay, thank you very much. My time is out.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, thank you very much. Just wanted to circle back to Speaker Beggs. Really appreciated your commentary around the importance of affordable housing, the need for the city to build affordable, supportive housing, which again, I think we are doing quite a bit in that area, making our lands available, working with other orders of government to support that as well. Just wondering, so two questions around that. I mean, first one that occurs to me is that a lot of the affordable housing development and permanent supportive housing development that we see is typically multifamily housing, so 4 stories, 6 stories. It tends to be higher density built forms because there are cost efficiencies with that. So just want to get your thoughts again, you know, if we're limiting opportunities for that type of housing, I hear your concern that, you know, private developers may take advantage of that, but that's also something that affordable housing providers can take advantage of. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
That's a fair question. Can I answer with an example? So about 5 or 6 years ago, the house next to my current property was valued at $300K. It was a small bungalow. It was a perfectly livable place. A developer bought the property, built a duplex infill, told the neighborhood that they would live on one side and they would rent out the other side. Instead, they rented out one side and turned the other side into a full-time Airbnb. Now, I spent years fighting that place and I finally got it shut down. But the valuation of each side of the duplex is $750K. So you went from having a house that actually was affordable to 2 unaffordable duplexes.
And
and it is more dense, but it is still more unaffordable than the house that was there. So this is my point.
Yeah, and I think
You are talking about building affordable housing, but this strategy of just increasing supply is not going to work.
what would work to create market attainable housing? Then?
Accelerating public housing projects, affordable housing projects.
So I'd be interested in your thoughts specifically on market housing. I think what we have found is that about 16% of the population requires access to non-market housing, to subsidized housing, but the remaining, sorry, why am I bad at math? 74%? 84, thank you, that did not feel right. The remaining 84% of Edmontonians are, you know, able at this point to access market housing. So how do we keep market housing attainable?
By giving private developers competition, by building more affordable housing.
Like affordable housing.
So if the city builds,
affordable housing is limited to people, their income thresholds. Do you mean?
Yes. I mean housing that is affordable, just in general. I mean housing that is where the price is based on income. I mean housing that is subsidized. I mean housing that is free.
So I guess if we were able to accelerate that, have more of those options for people who meet the income thresholds, I think that's a great vision, certainly something I'm committed to working on. What about folks who have higher incomes? But you know, maybe you're not wealthy. What are the market housing options for them?
What do you mean, what are the options? It's whatever is on the market.
And so how do we keep what's available on the market as affordable as possible, as attainable? Sorry, I'll say attainable because it would still be market housing.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I feel like what's being lost here is that I'm saying it will remain attainable if developers have adequate competition. But also, again, like I said before, you could get rid of short-term rentals. That would definitely bring down the pricing of everything. Because when you hear developers say things like, we will build this big building, and if people won't rent it, we'll just turn it into short-term rentals. That's what the Bentley was. And do you guys want more of that? Like, I keep seeing this example of that building in Windsor Park, but what guarantee is that any of that's going to be affordable? How much of it's going to be Airbnbs? You know what I'm saying? We need more protections for that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good conversation that's happening through other channels. I think, you know, when we're looking at affordable home ownership as well, I think when we talk about affordable non-market, that's typically rental. Anyway, I will pass that on to the mayor.
Okay, thank you so much. I will go to Councillor Briquette for second round.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to, follow up a little bit on that. Mr. Norbert, because you were talking about affordable housing too, and maybe supply makes more affordable housing because developers actually want to rent out their units or sell them, but we've heard that short-term rentals cause a problem. Is there a silver bullet here?
Well, we at Grow Together Edmonton, we agree with affordable housing initiatives of course, non-market affordable housing is very important. We're not arguing anything in exclusion of that, but I don't for some reason in housing, one of the big fundamental rules that governs our current system, which is supply and demand, seems to be questioned. In any situation with our market-based system, if there's more supply, it's going to be cheaper. I mean, to argue that, I think is, I would strongly disagree with
Well, that is literally the situation in Edmonton. We have more supply than demand, which is why our housing is more affordable, but that is set to change with this influx of population, which I think is causing some of this anxiety and worry. So I guess that's not a question, but.
Well, yeah, and I think that, we need to be very, we are kind of the last city standing, the last city over 1 million people that's still affordable. So I think we need to work hard to keep, copious amounts of, supply and not, get in the way of the market providing market housing and where that's appropriate. And of course, where people can't afford market housing, we fully support affordable housing initiatives. But it seems that often that's used to block. Well, if it's not perfect, let perfect be the enemy of good seems to be the argument. If it's not affordable housing, then we don't want it. But there's, if you build supply, all housing becomes cheaper. The more supply there is, the cheaper it is.
Yeah. So economic theory and reality tends to prove that, but I guess
I'm all for overthrowing capitalism, but can we not hold up rezoning, before we do it?
So I'll sidestep that, and I will ask. Councillor Carmel already asked the question I was going to ask Mr. Taft, so I'll follow up on sort of the concepts around that. And that is, speaking of affordable housing and things like that, and environmental builds and things like that, putting this onus on developers, this quid pro quo, may be challenged by the provincial government, who will say, no, City of Edmonton, we've been talking about this, and we do not agree that you can put these caveats on development.
Yeah, I think what was being referred to is called inclusionary zoning. So they did it back in Vancouver, a couple decades ago or so, where you demand these goodies from the developers in order to get better zoning. And it seems like you're getting free things from the developers, but actually, of course, they're going to pass the cost on to the residents. So what you're doing is kind of pre-taxing residents before they live in this building, because the developer has to pay money up front to get the zoning and then pass that cost on to future residents. So it's another barrier. Inclusionary zoning, which is this kind of extracting goodies from developers in exchange for better zoning, is just another barrier in letting people live in nice places near their jobs, even if they're not rich.
So, and we have a history of that at the City of Edmonton where we did do that, and what ended up is we, I think, had to end up pointing up money because of that. But so I guess the last question I have then is, if we are faced with, and it's the same question Councillor Carmel asked Mr. Taft, if we're faced with either passing this and refining it as we go, or reverting back to the city plan, which has less protections, frankly, which would you prefer?
It's a scary question. I need to fall back because organizationally we decided to advocate for the second, sending the maps back and falling back on the city plan. So that's what I would prefer. Speaking on behalf of Grow Together Edmonton.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pitcat. Councillor Stevenson, can you take the chair? I have a few questions remaining.
I have the chair.
I know sometimes people assume that we come into these meetings with our minds made up. This conversation is so fascinating that we're actually thinking aloud on all these questions and reflecting on what we're hearing. And I'm actually, my position on some things that we're actually being really, really influenced by what we're hearing, and that's the case for everyone here. So I want to ask some questions to Mr. Taft. The footprint of City of Edmonton is 69,000 hectare. And the primary and secondary corridors, if they're approved, are about 1,200 hectare. That is only 1.7% of the entire city, right? And I hear this argument that this is a radical change, right? So I want you to, can you comment on that? Like, it's a small amount of change. Yeah, I understand the neighborhood impact. I don't minimize that, right? But it's not a revolutionary change. It's not a radical change. It's kind of incremental change.
Well, the total footprint of the city of Edmonton includes farmlands, it
Yes.
includes huge industrial areas.
Yeah.
So I, with all due respect, Your Worship, I'm going to reject that comparison.
So maybe even if we compare
What I would say is that for the tens, possibly hundreds of thousands of people living in those corridors and nodes, it is a radical change.
Okay. I accept that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's the wrong change. Doesn't mean it over the long haul, it's the right direction. But I think there are wiser ways to do this. I would move more slowly, and as I've spelt out clearly, I would put conditions on how to proceed.
I know.
I would urge council to do that, obviously.
I know when Councillor Paquette was asking questions about market demand, supply, and its relations to affordability, you were shaking your head in rejection.
Yeah,
So why do you think Edmonton is, why home ownership is more attainable in Edmonton compared to, say, any other city in Canada?
Well, I think we need to be honest. An awful lot of the variables are outside of the control of anybody's hands. They go beyond the price of oil, the supply of materials, and so on. But I want to back up for a moment and just make it clear. Economically, housing is not a commodity. Okay, so the notion of supply and demand always balancing out works pretty well when you're dealing with economic commodities like crude oil or wheat, things that are sold in massive volumes of almost identical nature. Housing is not, in economic terms, a commodity. And so we have the example that Mr. Beggs gave of increased supply leading to higher prices, and that's a well-documented risk. With infill and with density. So,
But all those factors will be equal in other cities as well, right? But we are still affordable compared to.
Yeah, and so, I mean, in Edmonton, we have an immense supply of land. We have, the Canadian home builders in January 2023 ranked Edmonton, to your credit, as the easiest city in Canada to build a house. Made a big.
Isn't that a public benefit, though?
Well, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Okay.
And what we're doing here, what council is doing here, is considering making it a whole lot easier.
But you're saying we're not
I'm
getting
not
the
sure
concessions that we.
Pardon me?
We're not getting the concessions that you were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
what problem exactly council is trying to solve here. I'm skeptical. I could be wrong, but I'm skeptical that these changes will lead to improvements in housing prices.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I really, really value this conversation and your opinion.
That's right.
Thank
So do I. Thank you.
Stopping because I'm stopping 30 seconds before 5 minutes, right? So,
Thank you for self-regulating.
yeah. Okay. I'll take the chair back.
The chair is yours.
All right. So that concludes the questions to this panel. with that, we will go to our next panel, which is in favor.
Apologies, Mayor Sohi. We got some new information. The
Oh.
registered speaker in favor for the next panel has indicated they're actually opposed.
Oh, they're opposed. Okay, we'll put them on that list. Then we go to our next panel, which is panel number 8 in opposition. Okay, maybe.
7.
No, we've done 7. We only have 10 people on panel 8, right? Can we add more people to panel 8?
Yeah, but I believe currently you have, including the new speaker, you will have 13 speakers for the next panel who are in the post.
Okay, I don't have the new list then on panel 8, right? If you
I can provide you the
yeah,
list right now.
please, thank you.
Because this is panel 7.
No, and for me, it's panel 8 because the other speaker that was in favor withdrew, so that's why my number is panel 8. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, yeah. So why our numbers don't match is because the speaker on panel 7 that I had withdrew in favor, so that's why we're back into we're on to panel 9, right? Actually, in number-wise. Okay, Peter Wilson, in person. Please come up. You'll be number 1 speaker. Morgan Gowans, in person. Morgan Gowans. Not here. Robert Gibbons, in person. Robert Gibbons. Not here. Eric Estrada. Eric was here yesterday.
Online.
Online, okay. Curtis Treen, in person. Curtis, please come down here. You'll be number 5. David Manock, remote. David Manock. No. Eric Gormley, remote. Oh, in person. Okay. David Johnson, in person. So Eric, you'll be speaker number 7. David, you'll be speaker number 8. Dennis Coulthard, joining remotely. Dennis Coulthard. Coulthard.
Yes, it's Coulthard.
Coulthard, thank you. You will be number 9. Denise Innes. Denise Innes, joining remotely. No. Elise Gunderson Martin.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. David Crittenden. David Crittenden. Remote? No. Okay. We will start with Speaker Peter Wilson. Just one more, sorry. Thank you. Speaker number 13 will be Ellen Cruikshanks. Sorry, in person. Please come down here. You'll be number 13. Okay, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you don't mind moving a little more close to the mic, please, we'll appreciate.
Closer, is that okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Wilson. I oppose this plan for three main reasons. First of all, fire safety. Allowing wood frame buildings higher than 4 stories is a bad idea, according to many fire professionals. Number 2, infrastructure. Are our sewer and water treatment facilities upgraded enough to take 1 million more people? And 3, on a personal level, how I and my family are affected. I live with my wife in a garden suite in Glenora on the cusp of the West Block development at 142nd Street and Stony Plain Road. Other family members live in the main house, an upgraded, well-maintained 1950s bungalow. There is parking for 4 vehicles on the lot, which also has mature trees with an elm tree. The city has valued local by equivalence at around $40,000. If you take a walk around our area, which is now a node with a future LRT station 200 meters from my back gate, and there are lots of enclosed elm trees which have price tags on them, so I equivalent price my elm tree to that, the city's pricing. Across the north-south alley to the west of my lot, it's called, I believe, West Block Drive. To the west of my lot is the site of the former La Roma Apartments. It was a vibrant, low-rental place which housed 50 families or thereabouts. They were dem-evicted last year, and the owner-developer, Cantero Beaverbrook, want to build a 6-story rental block with a 2-story level underground parkade. This building will have a 0 setback from the alley, so it will be 20 feet from my lot across the alley. Recently, the developer has proposed informally an encroachment agreement to install shoring ties to be grouted and eventually abandoned under my property to shore up the monster 2-story deep hole to be excavated next to my property. What could possibly go wrong? In the future, the developer has plans for a similar building to the south of my lot across the east-west alley, a 6-story building. So much for my plan to put solar panels on my roofs to defray energy costs. So much for the smooth transition in the community as was promised in past developers' applications when 3-story townhouses were proposed and permission granted by that council. I'm concerned that if there is a financial crisis on the horizon, as I read that Canada is in recession, technically, that another hole in the ground fiasco will occur, as happened in the early development of the West Block, when a developer went bankrupt and was kidnapped and beaten. If developers need to get encroachment agreements, then something is very wrong with planning or the land acquisition process. This plan gives developers carte blanche and has no provision for mandatory affordable housing. In fact, without adequate upgrade fire code and infrastructure, the city is asking for trouble. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we will go to Morgan Gallants. Are you not there? Eric Estrada is next.
Morgan Guans. Morgan Guans was joining us in person, wasn't it? Or virtually? No? Robert Gibbons was not. Eric Estrada. Go ahead, please.
Hi. Is my turn or?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. I am connecting today to share my concerns about the district plan and specifically the name of Alberta Avenue District or 118 Avenue District as highlighted there in the plan. I share a letter co-signed by 13 organizations The majority of them community leagues that were not consulted in this name. All of these districts that are being proposed have actually a name. And the only one that doesn't have a name and is only named after an avenue that crosses the entire city is not really reflective of the character that we want to give to the area. When I think about the city that I would like to live, I imagine excellent public transportation, wide boulevards, and walking, biking, and other recreation activities. One of my concerns with this district is that when I first started reading through it, I was very excited for the opportunity to be invited to work together and envision the city of tomorrow as it's acknowledged in the city plan. However, after a few interactions with the engagement team and after reading the planning website and learning that the lines were already drawn and the names were already given, I learned that my feedback was not really welcome unless it was validating their vision and ideas preconceived. The city plan says there's this engagement is going to be an invitation to work together, but it isn't. The second major concern I have is the lack of identity and acknowledgement of each of the district's past and current socioeconomic environments. The size and lack of identity in most of these districts are the biggest giveaway that this is a gap in the proposed district plan. Even administration, planning, and philosophy boundaries rational report acknowledge that they took two different philosophies for district planning and tried to fit them into their ideas. Sadly, only choosing the worst part of it, choosing very large districts than what their cited references are actually encouraging. One of the philosophies look at existing boundaries, and it was mentioned before, we already have wars that each of you represent. And these were break it down to accommodate for these districts. These proposed districts do not acknowledge Edmonton it is already a community of communities. It grew up by incorporating other districts and towns. To ensure this is not just a gateway policy to eminent domain, remind everyone that urban planning is a part of a larger system, and it can be easily abused by those in power. Redlining may not be in practice anymore, but the color chosen for 118 Avenue District is red if you look in the map. Perhaps it was unconsciously, but even not listening to the conversations from community is part of the problem here. I sat in these conversations over the last 2 days, and I'm hearing a lot of fear and a lot of discontent with the way this was engaged. And I think it's because people are not they're not thinking that they're being heard meaningfully by administration, because there are plans that were already created that will just lead to these other plans. And there's really no meaningful engagement of the people that is living here. That's why they can't even change the name. Such a simple ask, and they couldn't even accommodate for that because they were not really looking for engagement. They were looking to preach their ideas. Oh, I got 14 more minutes to run.
No, sorry. I was distracted by something. Eric, thank you so much. Thank you for giving us 40 seconds of your time back, right? Next, we'll go to Curtis Treen.
Good day, councillors and mayor. My name is Curtis Treen, and I'm here to speak against the implementation of district plans. I'm speaking as a resident of the Lewis Estates Community League in the west end of Edmonton. My professional background is a civil geotechnical engineer, and have been involved in consulting on numerous infrastructure, transportation, and building projects in the city and along the River Valley for decades, and have previously been involved communicating with the City Council and former councillors Libovici and Mandel as the president of the Lewis Estates Community League in the early to mid-2000s. I've not reviewed all the hundreds of pages of the documents, but there are already many concerns and red flags identified and heard to date over adopting these new policies, especially when existing policies have been used for decades by administration and council in the development of our city, and they've worked. Some of the key concerns with the new district plans and the 15-minute communities to date arise from a scan of the documents. The word 15-minute community, wording and its intention starts the concerns, as heard by many already. In fact, I believe there are 6 panels that have been opposed to this process versus about 1 in favor. The new district plans seem to have gone full speed ahead at the time of 2020, when the world was turned upside down addressing a COVID pandemic with alarms, direction, and protocols for countries and communities put in place by global entities outside of Canada under the auspices of health. So a specific question to City Council and administration is who created the vision for the new district plans? This is important to understand as there is a large contingent of Canadians and Edmontonians that are not buying into the federal Liberals' agenda. Many concerns arise with the premise of the district plans as documented by the city documents. I quote, "Other strategies that inform the development of the district policy included, but are not limited to, Breathe, Edmonton Green Network Strategy, Edmonton Bike Plan, Community Energy Transition Strategy." All these strategies are okay in moderation, but the city has taken an extreme direction on all. Further, there is controversial wording that suggests interference with the travel and convenience of residents. I quote, "The 2 targets associated with this big city move are having 50% of trips made by transit and active modes, and where Edmontonians can easily access their daily needs within a 15-minute walk, roll, or transit trip. You cannot force people to walk or take ineffective transit. Are you planning to interfere with basic freedoms in this country?" The district plans seem to erase existing neighborhood and development plans of prior councils, so that those residents that have purchased and paid taxes for property for years or decades could be negatively impacted in the future. There are some that have presented in favor by using the word removing red tape as a positive. Removing red tape means having more control. If removing red tape means having more control and removing effective public engagement in order to speed up decisions on development initiatives, that would be the wrong direction for representatives like you that represent all citizens. Edmontonians that have been part of the development, tax base, and growth of Edmonton over the past many decades deserve to maintain some history, character, and satisfactions in their neighborhood. There is constant tension between infill initiatives and new development. City Council has managed to slowly and inconspicuously pass policies that enabled neighborhoods to be infilled, and in many cases against the desires of existing homeowners and neighborhoods. Pushing through new controversial policies has eroded trust. Growth for the city is great, and it helps share the cost, but it can also cause a significant demand on the system, and become a huge detriment if not planned and managed appropriately. There's something to be said about getting your own house in order before tackling new and different initiatives. There is mounting evidence that the current development and maintenance of infrastructure and roads and neighborhoods cannot be managed effectively and efficiently. The city seems to be having difficulty creating new and maintaining old transportation corridors without significantly adding to congestion and disruptions in traffic. This new administration and council over the past few years have a terrible record on balancing expenses and costs in the city. Isn't there an unsettling plan right now to increase property taxes this year by some 7% or more and plan the same for subsequent years? Why is that? Should the city not run more like a business and with both short and long-term decisions based on cost and revenue and establish a reasonable budget for services to the city? Isn't that the primary mandate of the city and council? Clearly, as with most all in life, balance is needed and extremes can create disaster and division within community. The current city council seems to all vote the same ways on major policies and controversial directions, and it's concerning
Thank you
that
so
there are not
much.
a greater
I'm sorry.
number of conservative and critical thinking councillors.
I'm sorry, 5 minutes are over. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we'll go to Eric Gormley.
Good afternoon, City Council. Where have we come in a century? More than a century ago, people flocked to industrial cities in Europe and Eastern Canada and the United States. The cities became overcrowded. Light and good ventilation was rare, and green space was a luxury. Tight quarters also meant a better chance of the spread of disease. In the early 1900s, industrial cities were considered places where people went to die. In the early 1900s, Edmonton was a new city with a bright future. Edmonton grew rapidly in the period when the industrial city was under scrutiny, and movements like City Beautiful, Garden Cities, and Garden Suburb were in ascendancy. Edmonton was planned on a vision of a healthy city. It was laid out on the grid system with boulevards and mostly single-family houses on lots that could be used to grow food as well. In the 1920s, Gladys Reeves talked everyone into planting trees. The idea of planting elms on the boulevards of all neighborhoods, rich and poor, caught on. The enthusiasm for a green landscape was covered in the newspapers. According to the Edmonton Journal, businessmen lent trucks and businessmen got up at 6 a.m. spring mornings and took to the woods to dig birch and elm saplings to be planted on city boulevards. The river valley as a public space was part of the plan. Ironically, the greatest civic effort put into preserving river valley lands for all to enjoy came in a 35-year stretch before the Second World War, when the city engineering department was in charge of parks. This department also supplied the trees we enjoy today. Enthusiasm for parks continued into this century. Then something changed. Now we pay lip service to nature. The vision of a long run of a healthy city with nature at the fore has been replaced with an obsession to densify. As Edmonton welcomes newcomers, we seem ready to turn our backs on the vision of keeping nature in the city. Single-family lots are anathema. Covering lots with more hard surfaces is a trend. We even talk about putting density in the river valley. We've assumed the mores of the past decades are outdated. The old zoning bylaw was 60 years old. We forget history. When Gladys Reeves was planting trees, the object was beautification of the city. That's enough for most of us, but a century later, we know about the value of nature to people's physical and mental well-being, about pollinators, about wetlands and peatlands and sponge city, about wildlife corridors, loss of species, and DDT. When the pandemic hit, people embraced nature. They got dogs and walked about their neighborhoods. River Valley trail use exploded. We know nature makes a city resilient. We've lurched from one crisis to the next. Rather than seeing neighborhoods as building blocks for the city, we see them as obstacles. City building has become a formula. So many meters from a transit station, this or that many stories should be allowed. The city plan has become a holy grail, but as one fellow said this morning, we can be selective in what we emphasize. We also know great cities result from thousands of small decisions made by residents over decades and even centuries. You have already opened up zoning to an extent that couldn't have been imagined a generation ago. Maybe it's time to step back, rethink district policy, consider Edmonton's past and what's truly worth saving. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we will go to David Johnson.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am here today from the Glenora Community League seeking your consideration for some sense of balance. A balance between old and new, peaceful and complementary coexistence between the accomplishments of the past and the goals of the future. What we're here considering today seems to be intent on moving Edmonton even further from any sense of balance between our history and our path for growth. But despite all that, I still have some hope. I get out and talk to people. I talk to developers in my neighborhood. I see their plans and goals. This, surprisingly, is what gives me hope. 2526, The urban mix policy amendment currently being considered for district policy is wrong in so many ways. It had very little public review or input. I heard about it only once, at a community league info session where it was presented pretty much as a done deal, it seemed to me, by city planners. In its worst case scenario of application, it intends to decimate our community. As an aside, I don't think that will happen, but I'll get back to that in a few minutes. It is complicated and I suspect will prove nearly impossible to administer. Inconsistency and unnecessary complexity are inevitable. What is a corner? What is a park or an open space? Could there even be case-by-case concepts for these? What is contextually appropriate area? But the main problem with 2.5.2.6 is that it is not in the public interest. We have come to terms with district policy and plans late last year. Now, a few months later, we get this further radical incursion into neighborhoods. I may even borrow a phrase from Councillor Rutherford yesterday. It looks like a breach of trust to me. You have already provided more than enough latitude for the development industry. Developers aren't like waiting at a starting line for the perfect scenario for development. They have budgets to balance. They're working now. Edmonton is way ahead of most Canadian cities in establishing a productive working environment for developers. One of the unfortunate side effects of all the zoning bylaw renewal and district policy and plans is that it has created a predominantly speculative environment. I look around me. Nothing is getting built. Numbered companies are buying up properties in the rezoning rampage currently in play and trying to resell them, often without success. Rather than increasing the population in many neighborhoods, houses are sitting empty, deteriorating, and subject to vandalism. Affordable housing in much of Edmonton, let alone where I live in Glenora, is out of the question. More housing, yes. For more people, yes again. But other strategies and more affordable properties will need to be found. Earlier, I mentioned developers active in my neighborhood. There is no doubt we are in a city of transition. However, all the urban planning theory and micromanaging on the planet, and I'm thinking now of 2526, will not put many high-rises in Glenora. 2526 is a symptom of overreach and a symbol of overkill, and it is not in the public interest. 50 by 140-foot lots, or even 2 or 3 of them put together, are not attractive to many developers who build high-rises. All the urban planning theory in the world is not going to make residential units with no parking attractive to most newcomers to Edmonton who would otherwise be interested in living in our neighborhood. And many of the developers who choose to work and invest in our neighborhood are not structured, financially or operationally, for those big projects. Their experience and their goals are smaller scale. Infill, single family, duplexes, garden suites. Please suspend any further consideration of 2526 for a year or more. Let's see some evidence of meaningful developer progress before trying to micromanage the process any further. It may not be necessary. In a free market society, supply and demand are the most important elements in finding the balance between commercial interests and consumer taste in real estate and housing. There are so many lovely neighborhoods in Edmonton. Some are more vulnerable than others. We live in one of the more vulnerable ones. Edmonton is such a great place to live. We know you agree with us on that. Let's find a way to grow with dignity and respect for our divergent points of view. Let's be the city with the best, not just the fastest, densification plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we will go to Dennis Coulthard.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dennis Coulthard. I'm the co-civics director of the Glenora Community League, and I stand opposed. You may be wondering what I'm opposed to. I only had two choices. I'm really opposed to the 2.5 and 2.6, and I felt blindsided when I found out about this. I thought there was order in the universe until this happened, and then all of a sudden it looks like the Wild West of planning. Get out your 6 guns and cherry bomb density just darn near anywhere. So my position, more detail, is that it just should be deleted. And from the standpoint of other matters on the district plan, one thing I've noticed is that the corridor of Stony Plain Road between Grote Ravine and 102nd Avenue doesn't look to me like a major corridor. It's got two railway lines going each way. I'm sure the trains will be full of people heading out to the large districts in West Edmonton. Not many of them will be getting off in Glenora, I don't think. The roads that are beside it are single lane on each side, winding with, I'm expecting probably a low speed limit. I don't think they'll be used by commuters. And on that basis, I think it should be reconsidered that is a major corridor. I don't think it is. Also, I noticed that many of the homes alongside that corridor are very nice homes. It would be a shame to have them knocked down and sent to the dump. I've also noticed I don't know as much we can do about this, but the 107th Avenue corridor, the homes alongside it are very nice homes too. So that's my thought about the corridor. Certainly from the standpoint of 2.5 and 2.6, it looks to me like they could just put density anywhere in our district. And I'm thinking our district, I think like a lot of districts, should be preserved to some extent. It should be a balance of density and preservation of the lovely housing that we have in our neighborhood. Speaking for myself, I'm a senior. My wife is a senior. We live in a 1,000 square foot home in Glenora. We have a vegetable garden in the back that feeds us vegetables all year round, a swing set for our granddaughters to. I think that style of life should be preserved where it exists. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with other styles of living, but I just think it should be preserved. With regards to engagement, my feeling is engagement hasn't worked very well. I don't feel blame to anybody on this, but I don't think it's been direct. And by direct, I get direct engagement on the sewer project. I think I've got 2 notices over the last couple of years. So I think going forward, we should really think about engaging directly with the citizens of Edmonton in the areas that are affected. I hear a lot of misinformation from people. I don't want to, some of them are pretty scary, hatred and that kind of a thing. And I think the citizens of Edmonton need to have the air cleared, and I think a direct engagement may be a good idea. I think it would be useful for the politicians as well, because I think they're being unfairly blamed, and there's an election coming up. So those are my thoughts about this, and that's me.
Thank you so much for joining us. And next we will go to Denise Inns.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, just a second. A city without intentional design is an inefficient city. That being said, a city that is already more or less functioning within communities, has a good roadway system and an available public transit system, does not need costly revamping of a system into 15-minute districts. Most people prefer not to travel extensively through the city needlessly and often use their already present 15-minute community. However, there will be cars and the need to drive. As wages drop for blue-collar workers and the price of living rises, more and more people will need 2 or 3 jobs to function. They may luck out with one job within their district, but likely have to go to crosstown for the others. In such a situation, they would probably rather save an hour or 2 per day driving driving rather than using public transit, allowing for extra time to take their children to soccer practice across town, pick up cheaper groceries at larger discount groceries in the stores in their district where a loaf of bread will cost twice as much. Being a resident of Woodcroft, however, one of my greatest concerns is upzoning of my neighborhood as a district node in the secondary corridor. Although specifically stated, the city will use the Housing Accelerator Action Plan, the outcome of which, quote, will be the alignment of zoning and development heights and densities in accordance with the district plan. I thought safe and secure in my home for my retirement years. Priority growth areas have now been connected to major roadways and roadway types. This wording particularly is disturbing given the association between government, road, private property, and eminent domain. When it comes time, will the last remaining private owner holdouts be expropriated in the light of the City Council's clear support of development, their intention to invest to support growth, and the direct taller buildings along principal and arterial roads? I suspect the veracity of developers who do not claim their primary purpose is deriving profit. This is a capitalistic society, and I expect them to want to make money, and that it is being so readily facilitated by City Hall is problematic. Developers should be made to address the concerns of the neighborhood. I have recently seen a number of buildings go up that are not worth their triple-paned windows and extra R-valued insulation. Although more housing units will be built in accordance with this bylaw, more housing does not mean that the housing will be affordable. Unless City Council controls the price of purchased price, rent, or lease of all completed buildings, the developers can ask whatever they want. That 20-story building going up may be comprised of 20 $1.5 million condos. If such pricing stipulations were to be included in the bylaw, I'm certain that it would be an outcry by the developers and many less likely to participate in future building projects. Lastly, although long argued, Edmontonians by and large do not know about the district plans. So I have a challenge for this City Council. Like Mr. Taft, recently I have received, our neighborhood had to Vision Zero Street Labs conducted a survey. They posted yard signs in applicable corners and invited input from the neighborhood. Unfortunately, the survey was directed towards certain responses, but allowed for public comments. I dare this council to put such signage up on every other corner along the corridors and nodes, clearly indicating that the proposed city bylaw intends this street and adjoining properties and the nodes and corridors supporting redevelopment for larger and higher residential and commercial buildings. Once this is posted, wait 4 months and you might be surprised what you see. Watch for the result.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will take a break at this time, and we'll be back at 3:45. Actually, I won't be able to be back at 3:45. So, Councillor Stevenson, you're going to take the charge from when we come back from break. Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay.
Council colleagues?
Good afternoon.
Councillor Knapp?
Good afternoon.
Councillor Principe?
Hello.
Councillor Paquette?
Good afternoon.
Councillor Tang? Councillor Hamilton?
Good afternoon. And good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Thank you both. Councillor Rutherford?
Hello.
Hi. Councillor Salvador?
Hello.
Councillor Cartmel? Councillor Rice?
Good afternoon.
And Councillor Jans.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. We are moving.
I'm here as well, Councillor Stevenson. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have our next speaker now, Elise Gunderson-Martin.
Yes, I'm here. Okay, and I'm sorry, I've got my cohort with me. She's pretty new to this, so she hasn't registered to speak. So my apologies if there's an interruption.
Don't apologize. We are always delighted to have our junior delegation members. Thank you.
All right. So, well, many people have spoken very eloquently here about the number of concerns that they have. I wanted to take a look at this from a slightly different point and look at it from the impact of change. And the proposed the plan here, it's going to bring changes. By its nature, change is often uncomfortable, and if it's not done with careful intent, it can get messy and even undermine the intended goals of the change. I've lived in Edmonton all my life. I've built my career here over the last decade and a half, working with people and businesses to investigate and analyze potential changes and build data-driven recommendations and strategies for implementation. As I look at these proposals and the degree of change that this is asking to be made, there are some red flags here that really no competent change manager or project manager would be comfortable with. I know change is cumulative, and it's really easy for people, especially right at the top, to say, well, let's do this, or we'll deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Let's get to the framework in place, and we'll work out the details later. After all, it's one change or one bylaw or a few things that are really just so similar. We can all look at it as one. But it's become apparent over the last few years, and it's not just with this, it's many things together, that there's been a failure to look at how all of these changes feed into and impact one another, or worse, that these changes have actually been seen and these concerns have been seen and they've disregarded just so we can get the framework in place. Change cannot be forced. It doesn't matter how positive the intent or how great the goal. If you don't bring people along on the journey, you're going to fail. The lack of effective consultation is evident. There's a lot of putting up surveys or information online, marketing it with social media. Unfortunately, its visibility is a slave to algorithms of the companies that you have no influence with. That's just asking for bad data or really limiting your reach. Speaking of data, change must be based on solid data. It really bothered me when I started talking with people to find out how resistant the administration was to providing the data that informed their decisions, not the final documents, what actually went into the buildup. Stonewalling for months, running out the clock of the absolute last permissible second on requests, quoting what I found to be, quite frankly, unrealistic prices for information, FOIP requests, or even saying that the information gathered only a year or two prior may no longer exist. That one really bothered me. But ultimately what that means is nobody can really sit there and verify in support or opposition what has informed these proposals. Change cannot be secretive or obscure. You can't achieve success by hiding less palatable changes or appearing to hide less palatable changes within policies that will come into effect when change is approved, or designing the change so broadly it can be interpreted in whatever way best benefits the moment. And finally, change, especially in a democracy, must consider who is most impacted. Well, the proposed changes benefit businesses, and there are benefits to individuals, but ultimately, everything is going to be borne financially, socially, physically, emotionally by the people. And so that leads us into asking why the general trend across multiple meetings, and especially, and we've seen it here, is the general trend is that developers and businesses are for these changes, or they want more of the changes, but individuals and groups representing communities are in opposition. Regardless of the intent, this trend is telling you that individual citizens are not seeing these changes as respecting the way that they live, work, and play in the city of Edmonton. we're not here to listen to what sounds like a dictation of administration's vision of how they think we should live. That's not we're here. I ask that you are here to represent us, and we're not hearing our voices. We're not being brought along on this change in an effective way. And if we don't send everything back to have them address a lot of the very good points that have been brought up here, this change, as it stands today, what is proposed today, will be resisted. It will fail, and in the resulting chaos, both the coffers of the city of Edmonton as well as the citizens themselves will pay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Next, we have David Crittenden.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I wanted to start by picking up on something that we started these conversations about in the administration's presentation. To quote from Kim Petrin, "We heard at the Edmonton zoning bylaw public hearings that Edmontonians want more clarity on what to expect and where change will be in their community. They want to know where taller buildings will be located and where new infrastructure will be provided. This project is part of bringing Edmontonians along on the journey of change. District planning is supposed to provide clarity for development and densification. It's about a sharper focus. With that in mind, I want to talk about two issues which I see in the documents, which some other speakers have also spoken about, but I will reiterate some of those points. Transitional areas need to be more clearly defined. This is to support bringing Edmontonians along. Understanding the gradient effect on how that will actually impact communities needs to be made clear. I think about this as I actually think about this as like a strength that we had in the specificity of ARPs that were developed in deep consultation and engagement with community members. As IDEA and Build and many other speakers, both for and against, spoke about, this ambiguity will add complexity and certainly erode public trust. It doesn't provide the necessary specificity to development or to community members to actually understand what can be developed and where, even in the context of the renewed zoning bylaw. Not in my community, but a recent approval, which we've talked a little bit about over the past day and a half, was in Windsor Park a few weeks ago. And according to how we read the draft plans, it actually falls outside of the university node corridor, or sorry, the university node. This type of development stretches node and corridor planning to an almost textbook definition of a slippery slope. This application and project really highlighted an issue for me. Again, it might have been a really great development, but the issue of when something borders a node or a transition zone. This project was approved and so the question becomes, would sites on the next block to the east be considered in this transitional zone? Perhaps these would be considered the transitional abutting area and allow for the next developer to build something similar. Or how about, say 223 meters away? Perhaps this would be a transitional abutting near zone. What could be built there? What would we allow an H28 or an H14 modifier? Again, understanding that context within communities and presenting that to communities and getting genuine feedback and engagement on that kind of upzoning. 2.5 and 2.6, I won't belabor these points because many people have also spoken eloquently about it. But I think there's a bunch of issues here, and other Edmontonians like myself are worried about the ambiguity and unintended consequences that will arise from this kind of development. We're considering retrofitting our property, but as I read this, I wonder if my neighbors to the south and west would be eligible to take advantage of this program, and therefore makes me question whether I would do retrofits and investment in our property with solar panels or passive solar design in terms of capturing some of those things, when I really don't have much clarity as to what can either be developed next to me or within that zone. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak today, and certainly welcome questions should I be given that opportunity.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker on this panel is Alan Cruikshank in person. Hello.
Hello, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be here to speak to you. By the way, do you have quorum right now?
Yes, with our online members, we do. But thank you. Thanks for watching that.
All right. Well, councillors, I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. My job affords me the opportunity to have Wednesdays off, and this is an important issue, albeit the groundwork for what we're discussing today was laid in 2020 when bylaw 20,000 passed. And I think the final reading on that bylaw was on December 7th of 2020. That being the, I don't remember the exact, the city plan. That was the actual city plan that was passed. And my understanding is the city plan was the vision. And I've heard it said, where there is no vision, the people perish. Well, this is your plan for the city for that have led to other things like the current discussion on the current bylaw 24,000, which is district policy. So there wouldn't be no discussion of district policy because districts wouldn't be thought of as needed, is my understanding, if it weren't for this initial bylaw that was passed in the midst of the pandemic. Our Prime Minister spoke of how the pandemic presented a unique opportunity to pass certain legislation that might not otherwise get passed. At least that was the implication I read into what he was saying during the pandemic, because people were distracted. I was distracted. I didn't know that this new city plan mostly had been formulated around UN's Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, had been passed, and this is the direction we were going to go as a city. Well, I'm opposed to this, this plan, city plan, because it implies a certain amount of groupthink. And I think the groupthink is misguided because it denies the brotherhood of man and it denies key aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll explain what those are, what the problems are. Diversity should not be a diversity of self-identified minorities. That's not what diversity is about. Diversity ultimately is a diversity of ideas and opinions. And even though they asked me today if I represented a specific group, and I had to answer no, I don't, I may have a viewpoint that is shared by many people. That's part of having a diversity of ideas. I shouldn't be judged by a group that I represent as me speaking for every single member of that group. I have a different opinion. Equity of peoples. Now, I noticed that the council has gone to naming their wards by different indigenous, given them different indigenous names. And I do believe that the indigenous peoples have been a great asset to Canada. But I think we have to remember that just because you have a community that you're a member of, that doesn't mean that the particular community that you're a member of is universally something that should be put on a pedestal, okay? There are issues in the Indigenous community historically of things having to do with warfare between tribes, enslavement of other tribes, and also things like the extermination of the buffalo. These are things that, in the light of today's informed sustainable development, might be counterintuitive. And so that's why we have to stop identifying with ourselves as specific groups, because even as individuals, we have all come short of the glory of God. And it's the brotherhood of man that matters. It's the brotherhood of man, and that's why we have to be careful about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because if you turn that into an acronym, it's DEI. And it's a Latin word that means God. If you say that DEI is your God, and you're elevating that as to be the vision for this city, I'd say there's serious problems with that. These communities, these divided districts, is an example of division, enmity, and with 1 million new residents of Edmonton, I see incursion. Thank you.
That concludes our panel. I'll go now to colleagues with questions of our speakers. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll go to Speaker Estrada. Thank you so much for being with us, and really appreciate you sharing a letter in advance about the desire to have the 118th Avenue District renamed. I guess I would appreciate just some further elaboration around some of the conversations that have been had with community leagues and the various organizations up and down 118th Avenue around the desire to make this change.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think the root of all of these conversations was that during the engagement, there was not an opportunity to really talk about how we see the district changing in the future, how we see the district inviting new people to join in here. Nobody really was asked, how do we see this moving forward, and how do we see ourselves in the district? What kind of even name do we want to have? I think the biggest concern in here is that the avenue goes across the entire city, and whenever there are safety concerns, those safety concerns live in the collective minds of the people of the city in our area, when in fact they're not happening in our area. And a case in point on that is when the 2 police officers were killed on the line of duty. That happened along 118, but this wasn't in our district. And I think that negative news and connotation to the avenue is being pinned unfairly to this area, and not even being able to engage with administration on that conversation. It is damaging the trust, because with other parts of city administration, we have a wonderful relationship with them, and they, when they're doing great things, we come with them and we work together on things. And it's very sad to see that in the planning and development team, we didn't have that opportunity.
Okay, that's helpful feedback. And yeah, I can flag, I'll ask that question of administration as well. I think it might be a matter of providing some direction around making a change at the city plan level as opposed to the district plan level, so that it's reflected in the district plans. But I can definitely follow up and get that info from city administration once we get there. And maybe just to kind of close that loop and ask one more question. I understand that there might be some efforts happening right now around rebranding the avenue. So I guess, do you see this as kind of an opportunity to tie into some of the rebranding efforts as well?
Definitely. We've been working with administration of other areas and community. We have a huge engagement conversation about how do we see ourselves moving forward. And it's sad that this part of the city is not listening to that conversation. So we are working on how we can show ourselves to the rest of the city and beyond, because there are great things happening here, and they're not really being noticed by some of these line makers and border drawers.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. And yeah, like I said, I'll follow up with administration, because I do think there's an opportunity here to really ensure that the unique identity and the changing identity of the avenue is reflected in that name. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Salvador. Next, Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson, and again, thanks to everyone for being here. Mr. Treen, I wanted to ask you, because you touched on some of the points in your presentation around that. You referenced controversial wording about the 50% mode shift. You've been listening to the meetings the last day and a half, have you?
Yesterday.
Off and on? Okay, yeah. And I guess, and so you've heard me ask a similar question, which I won't ask you, but around like, you know, is there actual wording in these policies that suggests there's going to be limitations or anything like that? The question I may be wanting to ask is, I think where I'm struggling is how do you sort of prove a negative, right? So our policy documents don't say there's going to be any restriction of movement. The actual investments that council's made over the last, 10 years, but even in the last 4 years, we're putting more in roadway investments than we've ever done before. We're doing $300 million on Terwillegar, $1 billion on Yellowhead. We're widening roads. We're going to be widening, working with the developers to widen Winterburn Road in your neck of the woods. So we're putting money into these things. We're doing all of these actions. Our actions are showing one thing, which is that we're actually trying to provide choice and options, and that aligns with the words in the documents. And yet, it sounds like you don't believe the actions and the words. So how do we get to that point of where you would, in fact, believe the actions and words?
Well, I think the inconsistency in the message is probably surrounding this idea of 15-minute communities, because as all people have talked about earlier, people live within 15 minutes. I mean, that's how community lives right now. Do you go out occasionally to go outside of that zone? Sure you do. You have to for sports, for all kinds of activities, life, play, everything. And so I think what it boils down to is that 15-minute community connotation that's in the document that sets the premise up for this whole plan goes exactly to what you're asking me the question about. So, and it also has indication that it wants to reduce travel or reduce the use of, well, whatever I quoted there, by 50%. Okay, so if you're trying to achieve that, and it also talks about 15-minute communities, well, one of the ways to do that is to eventually down the road set it all up so that you can restrict movement. You want to restrict it because you're trying to reduce 50%, and with climate initiatives and all that kind of stuff, you're trying to reduce by 50%.
Do you think it would have been any different had we called it walkable communities? I mean, that's 15-minute cities is essentially the modern day equivalent of walkable communities from the 1950s and 60s, right? Where you had neighborhood corner stores. So is it just the name? Like, is this a marketing exercise, I guess?
The problem the city gets into is this, of course, has been talked about in the last several years, especially to do with at the time of the pandemic, and the global organizations talking about this, so that when you guys use that same name, it's pretty easy to sort of put one with the other and say, this is what we're trying to do.
But I guess, would you personally feel different if we just said this is a walkable community, which is what urban planning, we try to provide choices and options, but if there are people to the point where they don't trust government, are they going to care what we name it?
No, I don't think it's about the name. I think it's the idea of putting this new policy in place when existing policies have been used for decades in development of the city, and they have worked mostly.
So what's new about this policy that's isn't what used to be in?
You're coming up with something new.
But what's new about it, though? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because again, the idea of having
700 or 1,000 pages of it, why is that needed? What's the purpose of it? So yes, we are growing. The city needs to grow. It's going to be densification in some areas, not other areas.
Yeah.
But you're frustrating a lot of citizen, and you can see by all the talk about this, with what is being planned and put into a new document when you're not even handling the current city itself properly.
So if we're not handling the current city properly, don't we have to take actions to try to develop better plans? Like, what I'm hearing you say is, hey, we're not doing it right.
Yeah.
So don't we have to start doing something to do it right then? Like,
you don't need a new plan. You need to revisit your existing plan and do better in some of the areas that you haven't been doing well in. That's all.
I'm out of time, but I'm going to come back around because I want to ask you a little bit about that financial piece, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you all speakers for being here today. So I would like to go to the speaker, Alan, and thank you for indicating very clear you're opposed to the city plan. So I just want to get the clarification from you, and because we are discussing right now is district policy. And then there interconnect and between the district policy and plans and the city plan. So if you are opposed to city plan, does that mean so this district plan, and then you are also opposed? I know you speak for the opposed, but I try to get that connection. So that means and city plan, and then you don't think that will be the good plan, good tool for us, and also this district policy, and it will not be. Is there any specific way you look at how our city could guide the future development? And is there any different way you think would be more efficient?
Thank you for the question. I had a hard time tying this very specifically in short order to the to be germane to the particular district issue. But I will tell you this. Just prior to the pandemic, I bought an automobile. I had not owned an automobile in 30 years, okay? So it's the first automobile I'd owned in 30 years. And that automobile was absolutely imperative to me having some sense of personal freedom and autonomy in this city and not being reliant on public transportation, especially since there were highly mandated requirements on public transit on things like masking and so forth. Now, I have in my pocket a transit ticket. It's a 2023 expiry transit ticket, and we're still using this on buses because it is my belief that Edmonton Transit wants to convert everybody over to ARC cards. Now, ARC cards sound great, you know, they seem convenient, you can refill them and stuff like this. This is one of the things that can go awry with a planning model that's based on the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. It takes away from people an opportunity to use a method of transportation that meets their needs, okay? Now, just getting back to the ARC cards really briefly, if I could. The ARC cards require you to scan the ARC card when you enter a bus and when you leave a bus. Well, if you wanted to implement 15-minute cities that did have restrictions on the mobility of city residents, you'd need just that sort of a system in order to control the distance that somebody could travel on a bus.
Thank you for your answer. And for me, as a councillor, and I strongly believe those public hearing is to make sure your voice to be heard, and also your concerns and questions will be answered, will be reflected in the decision making. That is why I try to focus on the solution, how to address the concern I heard from yesterday today, and how to get your questions be answered in the way, and you still keep that trust to our city. So I will come back for the next round.
I do have a solution.
Okay.
It has to do with when they were going to operate on my eyes because I had retinal detachment. One eye was fine, the other wasn't. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the way I feel, and we have one of the most affordable cities in North America right now to live in.
Okay, thank you very much for that. My next question will be very quick, and it go to Mr. Johnson. Are you there, Mr. Johnson? Yes, thank you very much. You mentioned about the 2.5, 2.6 as many other speakers. So my question to you is, if these two sections were removed, and then are you in the position to support this district policy, or you are still in general against this policy?
I'm not against the district policy. It's irrelevant whether I'm against the district policy or not because we've had that discussion, and I came here to discuss the new piece, the 2526. There may be things I don't like in the district policy, but I'm pretty much resigned to it at this point in time.
Thank you. Sorry, that's time. Appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor Jans, can you take the chair for a moment, please?
Regretfully. Just kidding. Yes, of course.
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to Speaker Krushenk. I was uncomfortable with some of the comments that you were making, and it's a bit outside the topic that's before us. You referenced concern with some of the ward names. That's an initiative I'm very supportive of. Just wanted to understand if you are aware of the city's Indigenous framework and our commitment to reconciliation.
Yeah, and I think every community, identifiable community, has highlights and low points.
Yeah.
And I don't know that trying to reconcile the sins of our parents that we are not responsible for is the solution to the problem.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to just stop you there. Thanks very much. It's a bigger debate, and again, not the matter in front of us. I think that I take your point around the need to create community, create connection, and for me, that's the fundamental part underlying our strategies in that. So thank you. I'll take back the chair, Councillor Jans.
Returned. Returned.
Thank you, Councillor Tang.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, thank you to all the speakers, and I think this is this might be our last panel, so thanks for sticking it out over the 2 days. Just very quickly back to Eric. Can you just remind me if you all kind of landed on an alternative name for that district, or are you kind of just waiting for the rebranding to happen before settling on something for recommendation?
Thank you for the question, and I want to clarify it a little bit more too, because again, it's very confusing when the district is being proposed and the lines have been drawn without really meaningful consultation. What it is called right now in these drafts, 118 Avenue District, is a lot more larger than our rebranding exercise right now. So the North Central is being proposed as a name for placeholder to cover what the lines for the district will cover, as highlighted or as noted by the city administration district plan. But the rebrand is to a much smaller section, which still have a lot of communities in here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I was a bit confused by the different pieces, so appreciate that. And I probably should specify, yes, that was to Eric Estrada. My other question is to Eric Gormley. Thank you for that presentation. And did you say that you were speaking, or were you speaking on behalf of an organization?
No,
okay.
Just speaking on behalf of myself.
Okay, I just wanted to understand kind of what's the outcome you're seeking. I heard you talk a lot about we must retain nature within the city. Are there any specific pieces that you're looking to amend or change?
Well, just one of them was, I think the central district plan, for example, it shows development down in Rossdale in the River Valley. That's something I would hope would get changed.
Yeah, and okay. So essentially, any kind of moves that could potentially encroach on any kind of density in the River Valley land is something you will be, of course, concerned about.
Right. That's
okay. Well, I think those are all really excellent reminders about green space, River Valley land, et cetera. So, anyways, thank you. I just want to get that clarification, and that's all.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. Would you like to move the second round?
Sure. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Please vote.
Councillor Principe is a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. Mayor Sohi, are you still with us?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. Councillor Knack?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Just to go back to Mr. Trina, and again, part of what had jumped out at me is, again, your conversation, and I think you're right. There's so much infrastructure in the city trying to manage that. I mean, I think about 10 years ago, we approved a plan to finally start catching up on roadway reconstruction by more than doubling the arterial roadway reconstruction budget because we weren't putting in enough money. We've got so much inventory, and one of the biggest reasons we have that is we have spread out very far as a city, right? And so I guess there's this tension of folks like yourself who have expressed concerns about property taxes saying, hey, you're not managing your current infrastructure, taxes are too high, and the number one driver for that is how far out we grow. And if we don't try to tackle that in a meaningful way, that equation will never change. And so I guess I'm looking to you for guidance, because it's one of those things that I think everyone wants more services and to pay less money for it, but that's not a real scenario, especially when we're growing out as far as we are. So I wouldn't mind your thoughts on that, of how do we do that? How do we manage the current infrastructure if we just keep growing further and further out?
Well, I don't think I'm going to give you a solution to that, but I'll give you a couple thoughts. I mean, I'm very aware of urban sprawl versus densification or infilling issues and the challenges associated with that. The city of Edmonton has built extensive infrastructure over the decades that I've been even involved in, both underground infrastructure for sanitary sewer and storm, and above roadways and bridges, etc. And so here's an example. The Anthony Henday Drive was, it's a big partnership with the government of Alberta. It wasn't here before, obviously, like 10 years ago. I don't know what the time period is. Everyone kind of managed the way it was at that population rate or size. And then the Anthony Henday Drive got completed, mostly. It's always under construction, but it mostly got completed. And you can actually do a whole loop all around the city. And all the connecting roads, so now all the connecting roadways that the city is responsible for, getting into communities, getting out of communities, they seem to be all disrupted, and they're not running smoothly. I mean, if you need to make it out of the community quickly, or you need to get into the community quickly, it doesn't happen anymore. So why is that? I mean, we've added an Anthony Henday Drive. That should be a good option for the White Mud and everything, all the other north-south corridors. But yet, it's not helping. That's not because of the rate of population. That's because it's not being designed and effectively managed. That's what I kind of get back down to. So, yeah.
Okay.
Sir, I can't respond to your urban crawl versus
because that's the struggle, right? I think about the area in Lewis Estates that you're in, and, that's about 25-ish years old, I think, in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And how, 10 years ago, Rosenthal didn't exist, right? 10
Correct,
years ago,
correct.
15 years ago, Secord didn't exist, and now they are some of the most densely populated communities in the entire west end of the city, and they're not even fully built out yet. And they've got that pressure because I hear from those residents about the rec center that they've been desperate for and we're finally building, and the library, and the widening of Winterburn Road, and the fire hall that we needed to build and finally open. And so, every time we're adding those new neighborhoods, we're getting that same series of asks, not just in the west end, but in northwest Edmonton, and southwest Edmonton, and southeast Edmonton. And so I think the whole idea behind the city plan and the district plans is to say, if you're not willing to change the status quo, which up until about 10 years ago was 95% new development outside the Henday and 5% infill, you're never going to get ahead of yourself because you're always going to have to play catch up. And so should we keep going under that old model, or should we try something that allows us to actually get to a point where we can maintain what we have?
So one of the key items that you just identified is knowing where you're going and when you purchase a property that I did 25 years ago. So a lot of people will do their due diligence and they will look into plans and area structure plans and neighborhoods for the future, knowing that it's going to change. What these district plans do is they, in many cases, I think they kind of ignore everything that's supposed to be happening in the future with people that have settled in an area, in a community, and it has the opportunity to completely change that. And you've heard about that 2.5 points. I think that's what it all relates to.
And I think that's an important
That shouldn't
flag.
be the case.
Yeah.
And the reason our community and our league got so involved with the Enoch Cree Nation casino coming up, because that was never noted before, and all of a sudden it became a huge issue, and we all had to get together and, you know, deal with that.
Thank you. I'm out of time. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. I'm not seeing anyone else signed up for questions of our speakers, so thank you very much for being here again. You're welcome to stay, continue listening online, but we'll be going to our... Okay, for the last panel. So I'll just call, these are individuals, there's a mix of in favor and opposed who were not available on their original panel. So if you're here, please just indicate that you're available. Is Ross Zimmerman here?
I am here.
Great, thank you. Dale Freeman? Dale, are you here? Okay. Abdul Abbasi? Sherry Little? Rick Pelletier? Sylvia Van Loveren? Ann Reynolds? Cameron Gertz? Marcus Wilhelm? MJ Kaza? Morgan Gowans? Robert Gibbons? And David Manick. Okay.
And a brief point of privilege, if I may, Madam Chair.
Please.
Public hearing is a really important time for us to hear from the public and hear their perspectives, and perspectives that some people, when they hear it and they came to speak in the opposite direction, gives them an opportunity to think about what they've heard or to reject it or whatever, what have you. And a lot of comments get directed at council, which can be inflammatory or cruel or rude or threatening. And that is fine. As elected officials, we know what we signed up for. And it is unique to the municipal experience to have this kind of forum, which I value personally. However, when comments veer into the realm of racism or potential racism, it must be acknowledged that that extends beyond what councillors are responsible for. It becomes a comment on how we receive those things on behalf of the community. And many people in the community can be very negatively affected by these words, and it's important to address them and acknowledge them. Now, the appropriate way to do that is unclear to me at this moment, because addressing them as a matter of public speaking goes beyond the scope of why we are here. But I do feel that it's important that for those who are listening, that they know that we have heard those things as well, that we reject them, and that we value every member of our society and our community, and we do not as a body subscribe to all the words that we hear, but we are very open to hearing all opinions, even when those opinions can be harmful, but we do not condone those harmful words. And I don't know how, as a body, we mitigate the harm for those who will be listening and those who will listen after, and for the parents of those who now have to go to their children and explain to them why they still are going to face struggles in this world simply for being born as who they were. And I just wanted to take a moment to express those thoughts, probably imperfectly, but I do thank the chair for the indulgence.
No, thank you very much for those words. Very powerful and very important, so thank you. We will go then to our first speaker on our last panel, Ross Zimmerman. After that, I'll do a final call, and then we will be concluded with our speakers. So, Ross Zimmerman, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Ross Zimmerman, and I'm a board member for Paths for People, which is a nonprofit based here in Edmonton focused on creating safer and more livable streets across the city. I am also an urban planner professionally. Paths for People supports the district policy and the district plans because we believe these plans will help make the city a friendlier place to walk, roll, and cycle. The documents, both the district plans and policies, incorporate a common set of policy guidelines that promote active transportation as a necessary, safe, and viable method of transportation across the entire city. These documents, if adopted, will further support and help implement other plans, including the Edmonton Bike Plan. We are happy to see the city plan's big move target of 50% trips by transit and active transportation referenced in this district policy. Through these district plans and the overarching policy, we believe the city will be well positioned to grow through proactive and deliberate policy decisions. With that being said, Paths for People does have some comments and concerns about the district policy and plans. We do support the adoption of these plans as soon as possible, but we also have questions for further consideration by council and administration. For example, as highlighted by Grow Together Edmonton, the district plans do not adequately encourage densification along transit routes through the delineation of dense nodes and corridors. District plans must create opportunities to allow more Edmontonians to live near transit in order to achieve the goal of making half of all trips by more sustainable transportation options. Another area where we believe more consideration should be given is regarding policy statements concerning mobility, specifically Section 3.1 of the district policy, which involves active transportation. We believe general district policy direction should direct for the implementing of bike lanes and multi-use paths along major corridors and nodes, instead of putting them one block away as with White and Jasper. Active transportation users, on average, spend more at local businesses than other travelers, and instead of pushing active transportation to less desirable routes, by incorporating infrastructure along popular roads, we can promote both local business and the overall vitality and safety of our streets. We provided these comments through the district planning policy process, and we do know that city staff listened to this feedback, but didn't act on it at the time. Paths for People would be happy to meet with councillors, administration to discuss these and all other comments. We support these policies, but we do believe there is room for improvement. Ultimately, city building is about living together and compromise, and Paths for People encourages you to vote for this policy and the associated district plans so that we can continue implementing the city plan and improving as we grow. I do understand I'm the only speaker on this panel unless there's anyone else, but I would be happy to take any questions that any of you councillors or the mayor may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll do a final call for speakers that were registered. Dale Freeman, Abdul Abbasi, Sherry Little, Rick Pelletier, Sylvia Van Loveren, Anne Reynolds, Cameron Gertz, Marcus Wilhelm, MJ Casa, Morgan Gowans, Robert Gibbons, and David Manick. Oh, so it... No, that's great. So sorry, just the final panels on items 3.1 and 3.2. But good clarification, yeah. Yes, we'll, at the end of the day, after we have questions of our speaker, we'll just kind of run through what will happen over the coming days for clarity to our speakers. So, questions to our speaker? Okay, I'm not seeing any. That was a very great presentation, very clear. So thank you again.
As I said, I waited and no questions. I must have done a good job.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, well, that concludes speakers on items 3.1 and 3.2. I'd just like to have our clerk team sort of talk through next steps.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Stevenson. The next step will be for questions of administration.
Okay, I think that would work well. I'm going to propose to my colleagues that we do a round of questions to our administration, as many as we can up until 5 o'clock, without a motion on the floor, just as an opportunity to get some preliminary questions. We'll spend a bit of time towards the end of the meeting, just again, sort of mapping out what the next day will look like. So I'll go first to Councillor Paquette. Councillor Paquette.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think there's some important questions that have to be asked right out of the gate, and we'll just get perfect clarity. Based on this district plan and the wording, some people have interpreted it as a will from the city or administration or council to restrict their movements in the future because we have a goal for alternate modes of transportation. Is there any desire, intention, or plan now or in the future to restrict people to districts or zones and impede their movement and their freedom of movement in any way whatsoever?
No, there is not, Councillor Paquette, sorry.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've got that out of the way, hopefully. Now, the next question I have is, we've heard from folks that maybe they would want us to refer, or they would like us to pass with amendments. And I understand there may be a motion coming on the floor, so I'll just ask in advance if you can detail it to us what potential timelines look like on a referral. And I know that's kind of hard because without knowing all of the aspects of what a potential referral motion may include, you can't account for every bit of work there. But a referral with what a person can assume would be some of the concerns that were raised versus passing the bylaw or the plan and then making amendments afterwards. And if there's a difference in timelines and if there's a difference in impact and implication for the city, and I'll just let you go from there.
So Councillor Paquette, I'll maybe start with just talking about how district plans really are part of city plan implementation. They're intended to be applied equitably across the city at the same time in terms of providing clarity where intensification is anticipated or supported. Now, as you indicated, there are a number of paths to go in terms of council's decision on this, to approve, refuse, refer back. Obviously, to approve, it becomes effective once we bring it back from third reading after the Edmonton Metro Region Board review, which is in a number of months. So in the fall, if it would be effective in the fall. If there was a referral motion to do some additional work, obviously we would need to see what that looks like and the scope and scale of the type of expectations in terms of direction of what is needed. So I would suggest, ensuring that we conduct community engagement with any changes related to that. That takes time, and so I would anticipate that would probably be, maybe 1 to 2 years, depending on the scope and scale of the type of changes. If there are amendments to amend the bylaw, we can still go through the regular process in terms of amending the bylaw and advancing it to the Edmonton Metro Region Board, and council could still approve it in the fall.
Okay. Now, so with the amendment process, and even if it was approved in the fall, would there be ongoing community conversations and engagement understanding that we also have other plans that also have to be approved. So would this public engagement continue?
I think as we've heard here today, and yesterday as well, the engagement around how we build our city, whether it be started with the city plan project, the community engagement or stakeholder engagement is ongoing with all of our projects, whether it's city plan, the Edmonton zoning bylaw, district plans, and we have other subsequent work happening. What's really important about district plans is the clarity it provides about why certain decisions are being made. And so notwithstanding a district plan, we're still bringing applications to council for rezoning that do have also community engagement aspects to it. And what district plans do is provide clarity on why certain applications are being supported or not. So that's another really important part of the importance of district plan, because those rezoning projects are enabling growth and new housing in our city, and having more clarity about why applications are being supported or approved is really helpful and important for communities to understand. Great. And for Edmontonians in general.
Thank you. I have so many more questions, but I'm sure my colleagues are going to ask all of the pertinent ones anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Jans?
I found one of the hard things about engaging in this debate was a lot of people talking back and forth at each other in sort of high-level principles about macroeconomics or whatever, instead of actually looking at some like brass tacks. So could you help me? How many 6-story apartments, 5/1s or roughly equivalent or whatever we want to call that, were built in Edmonton last year? Give me an average over 5 years. Are we talking 100, 10, 20?
In average over 5 years, you're probably in the 10 to 20 range per year. Most of that is actually done in the new growth areas.
Oh, really? Like outside of the Henday?
Outside the Henday.
Interesting.
And internally, that type of built form in the redeveloping areas has been sporadic at best right now.
So, not to put words in your mouth, but 5 a year for redeveloping areas?
That seems about right. Yeah, probably 5 to 7, 5 to 8.
Okay, so, and how many neighborhoods are inside the Henday? 200?
195.
195. Okay, so 5 a year, 195 neighborhoods. Like, we're talking 20 years of growth here. Like I think where I'm having trouble is like, I hear the housing advocates saying, 800 meters, let's go, let's look at the stations, we need to build, baby, build. Got it? Okay. However, when I look at actually what the market is building, how the finite amount of construction capital we have, the finite amount of labor we have, the finite amount of material even, like even if zoning was completely relaxed circa like Houston, how many 6-story buildings would you see built probably next year? Like, is zoning really the barrier here? Do you follow where I'm going here? Like,
a little bit, and I'll look to the team to complement this answer, but the district plans, their width and what's articulated in the plans is to reflect a population capacity of growth for 2 million people. And that's what we've modeled. So I can appreciate the feedback we've heard over the last 2 days about corridors being bigger or smaller. In terms of where we're at right now as a city, the width of the corridors that are articulated in the district plans will accommodate the growth that we need right now. And I'll just look to the team if there's anything more you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think as we grow as a city and mature the infill development industry, it'll take some time to ramp up to get a lot of buildings happening in 1 year. Don't expect, if district plans were to approve and in alignment with the zoning bylaw renewal, that there's a flood of 6-story buildings waiting to occur. District plans allow that to happen and direct it to where the mass transit lines are and where concentration should be in terms of taking advantage of existing infrastructure or where infrastructure is easily placed. So that is why there is a heavy emphasis on that directive point of how do we direct and guide growth to where it is best placed today.
So in your estimation, like if we're talking a neighborhood like south of the White Mud, north of 23rd Ave, hypothetically, when they may not be seeing a 4-story near a park circa 2526 or a 6-story near transit or something, maybe 5, 10, 25 years. Like this is, and it's hard to speculate. I can't put you on the spot, I guess, but where I'm feeling this tension is like the plans are allowing something, but then when I look at actual market conditions, I don't see some of this happening in my lifetime.
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of conditions, not only market conditions, which takes into fact the year of construction of the building that's being demolished. So a lot of times what we've seen through the infill years is that when neighborhoods hit that 60, 70-year-old time frame, that's when renewal starts, renewal being new construction. However, I'd like to point out that as we open up those opportunities for 4- and 6-story buildings, that opportunity to live within the community can maybe provide that extra demand that you may see some of those buildings built sooner than just when sort of those buildings are ready to be, or end of life or end of that useful value point.
That's what I guess I'm trying to get at is like, if we opened up more areas as per the plan right now, do we think that would dramatically shift the construction landscape?
I think we're creating a policy context to support that shift as best we can in terms of reducing regulatory barriers and guiding development to where it should go and where we look.
But
to
in
have
1
that
year,
consistent
20 years, like that's where I'm trying to. Sorry, I'm out of time, but that's where I'm trying to get to is like
Thank
timeline.
you.
Sorry, I'm out.
Thanks. Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, thank you. On page 2 of the report, the very first admin report, it discusses how the district policy and plans will be amended as needed. And this was raised by several speakers in terms of concerns about what that looks like. And it was actually something that I had flagged in reading this too. So I wanted to get a sense from administration of what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, Councillor, all plans can be amended and typically are amended when an application comes forward for some changes that the city wants to embrace, that we feel supports the overall principles of good planning and our strategic objectives. The district plans were designed so that they would require fewer amendments than other types of plans we worked with in the past. For example, a lot of ARPs might be extremely prescriptive in terms of what outcomes can happen. And so any deviation from those, even if it's rather modest, say from a 4 to a 5-story building, requires an amendment. The district plans are designed to be more flexible than that. So you would see fewer amendments to the district plans.
So why is industry raising concerns about more red tape and their concerns about actually this could create another layer that they then have to pay for, and that can create, like, I feel like that's, like what you're saying isn't lining up with what the panelists said.
Yeah, in our conversations with our colleagues in industry, they've expressed apprehension that when, say, an amendment in a neighborhood structure plan, perhaps just an amendment in one part of the neighborhood structure plan, by opening up that amendment, that administration will then ask for them to revisit everything in that plan or make dramatic changes across that plan area. So we've shared that that's not our intention. We look to senior plans to guide the application in front of us, not to redesign or open up neighborhood plans. But I understand that they would like more assurances.
Sorry, I do not understand what you just said. So, like, can you break it down for me? And if I don't understand, there's definitely other people that are listening that do not understand. So, okay, like, can we just break this down? So let's talk about let's use the example of Greaseball, right? So Greaseball is in Northwest District. It has an NSP, right? Neighborhood Structure Plan. They are going to come and they want to do revisions to that structure plan. What will that look like? What will that look like?
It'll look like a process that's very similar, if not the same, as it is today.
Can you break down that process for me?
So when you come in for an amendment, we'll say you're amending a parcel of land from a row house to a 4-story building. That'll typically come in the form of a change of land use designation in the plan itself. So in the NSP, there's a land use map that identifies where these types of buildings can occur. So there'll be an NSP change, and with that, likewise in newer neighborhoods where you have an ASP, an area structure plan where there may be another amendment required, a map amendment might be required. That is the same in the district plans where a map may be required, but the process is one and the same. There is an additional map amendment requirement, but that doesn't slow down any of the processing of that application or changing the fee structure for that matter.
Okay, and then I'm going to focus my last minute on transit-orientated development. One of the things that I was really surprised about in general, and I think it's with the maps and then referencing the maps back to the policy. So I'm like, there are some areas that I don't understand why they wouldn't be considered like a primary corridor, and I also don't understand why all mass transit stations wouldn't be treated the same across districts.
So our starting point is the city plan, and so the designation of corridors within the city plan, that was our starting point. And so we've carried on that designation, so if something is a primary corridor in the city plans, primary corridor in district plans. And so that in itself hasn't changed. And we also looked at the TOD guidelines for direction on the scope and scale or the intensity of development around mass transit. And so that is for all of the stations, they either equal or surpass the intensification that was envisioned within the TOD guidelines.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I'm going to go next to Mayor Sohi. He had indicated a desire to speak before. There's just a bit of a delay getting him on the list. And then that will be our last round of questions for this evening. I'll just provide a bit of a summary about tomorrow. So Mayor Sohi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for accommodating this. First of all, I want to thank administration for their work and engagement with community. I know we heard some criticism. I don't necessarily agree with that criticism, but people have the ability to express in this public setting. I'll keep my questions for first round at a very high level. We have desire to accommodate 2 million people into a population up to 2 million, and half of that needs to be accommodated in existing or redeveloping neighborhoods. And we have made changes to zoning regulations last year as well. And we have a number of other plans coming our way, particularly on the substantial completion, how existing neighborhoods are completed before we give approval to new neighborhoods. So how does this district plans and the policy intersects with that development, Kim? That future work that will be ahead of us.
Mayor, it's Kent Snyder. So the district plans, everything that we do points back to city plan. So that is our foundation in which we're grounded. District plans are grounded in that vision, as are substantial completion, that work as well. And so if they are both in alignment with city plan, then they are complementary. And so substantial completion refers to the lands in the city plan that are noted as future growth area. And substantial completion, that project is looking and exploring what is the criteria needed to be achieved for completing a neighborhood in the developing area that would give council confidence to authorize new homes and development to occur in the future growth area. So district plans recognize where we're at and recognizes what the city plan says about the future growth area. And if substantial completion council makes a decision on that, the district plans potentially could be amended to make sure that they're in alignment.
Okay, so if council decides that we are going to not grow outwards, then you would definitely need to amend the district plans to accommodate more growth than what is projected under the plans presented.
Perhaps not quite exactly. If there was a foundational change like that, it would likely be revisiting the city plan.
Oh, I see. Okay,
I see. On growing in the future growth area at some point.
Got it. Okay, because the city plan envisions smart ongoing growth in the new areas.
It does. So substantial completion is not should we be there, it's a matter of timing.
Got it. Another one is the industrial growth strategy. I don't think city plan is ambitious enough on industrial growth, and to stabilize our finances and reduce burden on homeowners, we need to be more ambitious on industrial. So how does district plans will fit into the conversation that we're going to have in a couple of months or month or so on how to be more ambitious on industrial growth?
So, Mr. Mayor, the district plans will reflect existing industrial areas along with the context provided in city plan for non-residential development. Next month, the Industrial Investment Action Plan will come to committee, which will articulate actions to that the city can implement in terms of trying to accommodate more growth in our non-residential tax base. So,
Okay.
so the district plans are aligned with city plan, but in terms of additional actions through the Industrial Investment Action Plan, that will be more specific in terms of how we target and grow that non-residential sector.
So is our city plan supports more aggressive industrial growth?
The city plan still, like within the city of Edmonton, we still have industrial lands to develop. The Edmonton Energy Technology Park is an example, and certainly just north of the airport, Crossroads area is also developing. So we do have some developing new developing industrial areas, and whether we need to account for more lands, I think we still have room to grow, but right now we're really focused on how we attract and grow the non-residential tax base.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Mayor
Thanks.
Sohi. All right, we're coming up on time. I just want to do a quick recap just for our public speakers and members of the public who have joined us and signed up to speak. So we'll shortly be going on recess until tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. In the morning, we'll continue with questions to our city staff on these first two items, items 3.1 and 3.2. For anyone who was registered to speak on one of the later items, I want to let you know about the process moving forward. So there is a possibility that a referral motion will be put on the floor tomorrow. If that passes, then all of the items on the agenda are going to go back to city staff for future work, and there will be no further public speaking. However, if the referral motion fails, then the process will move on to the other items, and there'll be an opportunity to speak to those specifically. So all that to say, if you are registered to speak on a later item and you're still interested in speaking, please stay part of the meeting. We will be discussing and debating these current items first, and when we have decided on that, then you'll have a better sense of if there'll be an opportunity for further speaking or not. That is it. We are now on recess. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.